microphone working here.
You got one each?
You do.
Maybe.
Please use it. I know you like it, Karen.
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's yours.
Well, you guys have been in the holding pattern for 45 minutes, huh? You're very patient. I appreciate it.
That's for sure.
We had some good conversations about life in general.
Very good.
The meaning of life?
Yeah, of course. We worked it all out.
The nature of man. That's really silly.
I wouldn't have noticed for what it's worth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wouldn't have gotten it.
Guess we're still missing two. Do you want to wait, or should we get started?
Let's get
So
started.
they can get a visual.
Thanks, Dave. All right. Are we recording?
Officer, because I think somebody in the ladies' room might need some help.
Uh-oh.
Give Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem a moment.
Okay. Somebody going in to help?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, they're here.
They gone in.
There's an officer here.
How you doing?
Okay, how about yourself?
Good. Like the guy falling off the Empire State Building, I guess. Until you hit that bottom floor, it's all good.
That's right. Yeah.
So Jeff, every floor so far so good. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't need
Don't
it.
hit terminal velocity.
Well, people who
Sometimes
follow
there's
us.
a pillow down there. You never know.
Yeah.
Depends on whether you hit it or not.
Yeah. Not head first.
No Swanda. It depends on how many pigeons you hit on the way down. New York's got a lot of pigeons.
Are we recording?
Rita,
Okay,
did
great.
somebody go in?
The
police
police
officer?
are there now.
All right, thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Englewood study session this Monday, September the 10th, and we have a full council tonight. Our first item on the agenda is a floodplain fee waiver discussion, and this is for Directional Information. And Community Development Director Brad Power and Chief Building Official Karen Montanez present. And they're present to discuss additional permit fee waivers and options for storm damage recovery.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of Council. We wanted to take a few minutes at the beginning of your meeting tonight to talk about a couple of modifications that we are asking you to consider and some additional direction from you for us relative to our ongoing efforts to enable the community to recover from the storm events of July 24th. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we're asking you to consider and give us some direction on that are included in the study session memo for this evening. The first thing is, as you're aware, very soon after the storm, within 48 hours, we had a fee waiver program in place for people who were impacted by the flood to do the level best that they could to make sure that any repairs to their damage or recovery of their property was done through properly permitted work and through properly licensed contractors. And so you'll recall that on August 20th, you adopted an ordinance to that effect. And so we've been under that program for a while, back to July 24th. We've just not been collecting those fees. It hasn't been a huge volume, but we want to make sure that people in town know that we want this sound work to be done. So one of the things that we would like to do is extend the period for that to run from October 15th through the end of this year. So if you're okay with that modification, we would come back to you and make that appropriate modification. It's more art than science to try to determine the end dates of these because we really want to try to not have them be so extensive that people just are continually pushing the decision-making on their properties down the road. So we think the extension from October 15th to the 31st of December makes sense for the existing fee waivers that are in place. The second thing that we are proposing is based on the fact that Englewood has a lot of houses that have either basements or basement units that are rentals that were built long before the code changed and required egress windows or emergency window exits in those dwelling units. And so one of the ways that we want to incentivize the entire community to consider those retrofits in homes and in rental properties is to waive fees for egress windows. And we were proposing that be for a much longer period of time. It would essentially be from the storm date through December 31st of next year, of 2019. And again, that would not just apply to the flood-impacted residences. It would apply to every residence in Englewood. So we would try to have a communication strategy around that so that the community is very much well aware that waiver would be in place. And maybe that helps people make the decisions that it would be a good time for them to invest in those types of retrofits to their individual properties. One of the things that had come up that was a question as well, which was whether or not we want to consider waiving fees for roof replacements in association with the events of July 24th. And we outlined some of the issues relative to that in our memorandum for this evening. The one that I think that we'll touch on, and because we're not recommending that, however, we are looking for your direction on that particular issue tonight. Those are a little bit different than water damage in terms of how insurance companies mostly treat that. Those types of roof replacements that are storm-related are far more likely to be insured through people's insurance coverage, unlike the water damage that people experience as well. So those are some of the things that we wanted to put on the table in terms of some of the interim things that we'd like to modify. Again, the one that we want to modify is the existing fee waivers to extend that time for applying for those to the end of this year, and then egress window replacements would be through the rest of this year and all of 2019. And we'd build some type of public communication around, particularly the egress window replacement ideas, to make sure that the community far and wide knows that it applies to every property, not just those that were impacted on July 24th. So with that, Karen and I are here to answer any questions and seek your direction on those items.
Thank you. Council, what are your directions? Let's take them one at a time, starting with the existing temporary fee waivers. Councilmember Barentine.
Is there any change to the requirement for the egress window itself? Any specifications that have changed? Because in the second house, it's my understanding, going and talking to some people in that area, that the second house right next to the house where Rachel passed is built exactly the same, and it had an egress window, and that egress window was pushed in and would not have saved the 4 children that had their bedrooms down there. They would have drowned if they had been in that home. So are we making any changes to where the egress window is, especially since in that particular instance where the water is designed to come from, in order to make sure that an egress is actually would save somebody rather than be
The egress requirements for windows is typically designed for fire rescue in general, not so much for flood. We have not amended the code to change the egress requirements. They can swing out, they can swing in, they can be sliders. There's no requirement for that.
So if we could have some, just some feedback on those kind of situations, how that is, like where they're placed on the building, and if there's any other requirements on there, because it really breaks my heart that even though the other home had one, it would not have been a measure that would have saved him. But thanks for clarifying that. Generally, I think you're right, they are for fire, but we need to have a little bit more information. And you're saying that we're only doing this from till the end of the year now instead of October?
Yeah, let me clarify. The existing fee waivers that we put in place immediately after the storm, the ordinance that was adopted on August 20th expires on the 15th of October. We are proposing for the existing fee waiver process that go through the end of this year. For egress windows, it would be through the end of next year.
Okay. All right. And then I think I requested, I don't know if it went through, whether we had a process for somebody to go ahead and have an appeal process. That I had heard some people had gone ahead and asked for the permit, tried to go through this process and were denied. And I had asked that we have some kind of review or appeal process. If they were, do we have that in place? And can we get the copy? Has that been made available yet of what the application process is?
We have not denied any applications for the fee waiver. I'm sorry, we have not denied any fee waivers.
Okay.
So I don't know.
I think, yeah, maybe there was some misunderstanding that some of them had been done because we were told that some hadn't.
We had one person that it was a contractor that came in to do a water heater replacement. They did not indicate it was from the flood damage. Once we found out, we've already issued that refund to that particular contractor.
And I think part of that came from
Manager Keck has some.
one of the from Vicki Harmon, I think, was an email that we had received. So the two things, if we could please get a copy of the application, and we could please get whatever the process is for an appeal.
Manager Keck has some.
Yeah, sure.
things to
I
add.
think what Councilmember Barentine's referring to is we did have an individual who had a classic car stored in a self-storage unit down off of Radcliffe, and he asked if he could get a flood payment for that, and we told him that did not qualify because it wasn't a domicile, it wasn't a home. Somebody's classic car in a storage unit isn't a home. So that's the only way that I know of anybody who's been denied at this point. And just so you're aware, late this afternoon, and because you've been in these meetings, I did send the applications to all the council members.
Okay, so it may just been anecdotal from what he said, but that did give me the idea that we needed to see that. And anybody who's denied, I would like to see the appeal process, even if it's for something that wasn't covered on there. Sure. I apologize.
Sounds like at this point, there's no denial of anybody that you have any record of. Thank you.
Do we have an
Councilmember
appeal
Wink?
process?
Well, let me clarify. One of the things that
Someone
we're doing for the community is when people come in and they're going to say, this is for flood-related repairs to my home, we're going to waive those fees. So I don't know that an appeal process is necessary.
Well, we'll know more now that we see the application. Maybe the application will answer that question.
I think it might.
Okay.
Thank you for being willing to send that out, and it's already out. Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. I am in support of extending this deadline to the December 31st date.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. In the memorandum, you mentioned that only 9 permits have been requested. I'm shocked that that's so low, but I'm also in favor of extending it because I think maybe some folks are just, kind of seeing what the damage is and would like additional time. So,
Thank you, Member Martinez. Member Sierra.
I agree as well to extend the dates to the end of 2018 and 2019.
Mayor Pro Tem Wesson.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree as well. And I have a question. Is it possible to advertise in the city magazine, that the new one that's coming out? Because perhaps not very many people have applied because they don't know about it.
It's my understanding that all of the homes that were flooded have received either notice, correct me if I'm wrong, notices in some way for fee waivers. Has that gone out via email and a hand copy, hard copy, or?
Our building staff went around and door to door in areas of known flooding. I'm not certain that included the entire community. And as you're aware, we had persons who came up from disparate areas of the community. So we can put that into the Inglewood Citizen magazine, I think, for this next edition.
And I would especially recommend that for the egress, if you choose to do that, for the egress window waivers, because that would carry a much longer time frame well into next year.
Yeah,
The other thing I would mention is we did leaflet and flyer approximately 100 businesses in the community as well in person after the events with the applications and the information for the waivers.
Member Quist?
Thank you. I support the extension on the damage through 18 and then the egress window citywide through 19. Kudos to the city for incentivizing public safety and building those in. So I think that's a really good step forward. I would also support the fee waivers for the wind and hail damage that occurred to those houses that were affected due to the July 24 storm. Looks like it's been pretty minimal so far, and I certainly appreciate that those are more likely to be covered and can be a little bit more difficult to determine. Has it been damaged for years? Was it this most recent flood? But I would prefer to get benefit of the doubt, and I would like to see those waived as well. Understanding I might be in the minority on that one, though. Thank you, Mayor.
Sounds like we have consensus at least on the extending the existing temporary fee waiver for the building permits and plan reviews, and I agree with that as well. And I would love to. It's my idea to bring the egress thing up, and I know it's not going to be a sure, clear-all cure for any kind of disaster, other than it's the right thing to do. So I'm very much in favor of the egress, and I would like to see a public educational process for us to do that. And I'm sure that community development has a lot of ways to do that. I still would like to hear folks about the hail damage and wind damage. I'm a little bit more uncertain about that, although I think if this happens again in 2 years and we have a lot, we make a decision at that point if we think it's important. Member Martinez?
I think she's
okay. Member Wink.
It's a quick point of information. So when we hand delivered, well, that was to businesses. When we notified residents impacted, Manager Keck, I think this might be your question. How did we go about notifying, and were we successful in reaching all of the citizens that were temporarily displaced? Red Cross, did the timing coincide with that displacement of residents?
Again, it was the week after that the building, 2 weeks after that the building staff went around to those areas that were known to be impacted. So in some cases they just had to leave a card. In others they were able to talk to the homeowners or tenants at those locations. And so, again, it's kind of hit or miss, and so we're happy to further advertise this.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely worth continuing.
Yeah.
But I did want people to know that they did go out and put things on people's doors as well as in, electronically if they were, and then if they came in and said that. But there, like Manager Keck said, there are people who've had damage that have never reported it to us yet and are just finding out that there's actually something ready for them with permitting. Councilmember Martinez.
Thank you. I really like the egress window fee waiver. I think I like the duration of time, over a year and a half or so, to allow for that. It is a pretty large ticket item, so I think if folks can plan maybe further out in the future, I think the duration of time should help with that. And I think that's a really great idea. If we can get some communication out about the importance of that for safety, for fire, or anything else you may need, that it comes into play, then I think we should do as much as we can around that. So I think that, and good suggestion, Mayor. I like that.
Councilmember Wink.
Thank you, Mayor. Regarding the egress window piece of this discussion, could it be easy? Could it be beneficial to the city? Meaning all of us, right? All of us in the city, to also include some kind of information about just how that works, such that we can educate a little bit, take advantage of this opportunity to educate regarding responsibilities and what state laws may say about what we can do or how far we go, how far we can't go, how far residents should go in terms of taking care of the egress windows. We have a benefit here to offer and to share, but I want to not miss an opportunity because I've learned so much about what state law says and what we're really bound by that I know a lot of citizens don't know and that I still need to know more about. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, you're looking at me, but I agree. I think the more information we can get out there on egress and any other kinds of safety issues regarding a home, particularly for fire and for water, is just the right time to do it. And we're giving ourselves almost a year and a half to really get the word out there. So I think if community development can come up with some sort of a plan for educational pieces, and then maybe communication folks can help with marketing, roll it out. We've got at least a couple of magazine issues that could be devoted in some way or another, and Tony Arnaldi with her See It Reported kind of movement. There's a lot of things that can happen through that, but I agree. I think it's,
Thanks.
All right, so it sounds like we have consensus. Oh, I'm sorry, City Attorney Kenny Brown.
So when this comes back to you, it will come back in a different looking ordinance than you saw it the first time. Extending this would require an additional ordinance. But one of the things that Director Powers and I were briefly talking to you the first time this ordinance came up was that we were racing to get something out immediately, but that we knew we needed some longer term options. So when this comes back to you, and I think we can have it back to you on the 17th for your approval, it's still an ordinance. It still will require 2 approvals, but it will be through by, I think, October 1st, so the timeline is fine. What we're going to be suggesting is an amendment of Title 7, Chapter 7 to add a new Section 9, and the new Section 9 will go under the emergency management section of your code, which actually has 6 sections, mostly having to do with fires. So we'll be looking at emergency management over the next year. But this would add an additional provision to that section, which would make this easier on future councils having to deal with these kind of situations. Instead of having to go through this 2-step ordinance, what we'd really like to do is allow the city council to designate an event an emergency like you did with this flood event. It's a local emergency. And once you've designated an event a local emergency, you can, by regular motion, decide whether or not to waive building fees. And that way, it's just something that you can do quickly. Then a subsection B will allow you as a council to recognize a specifically identified danger or harm within the community. For example, the lack of egress windows in people's homes. And again, authorized by regular motion waiver of certain fees associated with correcting whatever that danger or harm is, so that we don't have to keep jumping back through ordinances every time you want to do something to assist the community with these kind of events. So that's what we anticipate the ordinance will look like when it comes back to you next week.
Thank you. That's great. That's really helpful in being proactive in all this. Appreciate that. We haven't discussed roof replacement permit fee waiver. Member Cuesta said that he's in favor of going forward to allow for it. Are others wanting to weigh in on that? Mayor Pro Tem.
I actually agree with staff on this because roofs generally are covered for storm damage on insurance companies. Now, the truth is we had to replace a roof that, well, we wanted to go from a shake roof to a regular roof. The insurance company would not pay for it. But it wasn't, I mean, there was storm damage, but it was really thick shakes, and so it stands up pretty well. So I do think that if storm is causing the roof problems, that most insurance companies will cover that. So,
Member Barentine.
For the areas that were in the flood, however, if it goes past that deductible piece, I am concerned about the additional cost and if it's not covered for other wind damage, because that could be more than, I mean, the reason that we had, from talking to people in the community, the reason we had such a problem, especially for those 2 homes, is that you had a fence break. And so there are other damage to fence, I mean, other things that may come under that wind damage that I'm not sure that we're covering. So wind or the flood damage. So I'm not sure if we've got the whole picture. Are you only, Councilmember Cuesta, are you only addressing the wind, the damage to just roofs for additional, any other
I believe
permits?
I'm just sticking to what we have presented in front of us, which is my understanding, roof damage per wind and hail in the July 24 storm. It is under that scope, yes, that I am supporting that.
Well, if it's only for the roofs itself, then I would probably not. You're probably correct. It probably already is covered if we're just doing more of a wind damage, and that would include the roofs because we had the fence. I mean, it backed up the water enough so that it broke it, and then actually made that whole flood thing a lot worse. So I wouldn't support it then if it's only for the roofs.
Councilor, want to answer and get next? Go ahead, Matt.
I just wanted to make a quick clarification to Councilmember Barentine's discussion. If people have damage on their properties that was caused by the events of July 24th, they're still eligible for our grant program. And so if people have $2,500 or more in uninsured costs, they're eligible for our $1,000 grant program. So we're doing that as well.
Okay, and then can I have a clarification since you brought that up? I heard somebody had received $5,000. Was that through that same program, or was that in addition a program with addition of another program?
So what we've done is we've expanded the program. So you're familiar with the Energy Efficiency Englewood program that we do home repairs that are basically for energy improvements for income qualified residents of Englewood. One of the things that we've done for our flood grant program is increase the eligible dollar amounts up to $5,000 for those same income qualified households that are obviously lower income and are struggling with the recovery. We've done 7 residential grants so far, and one of them has been for an income qualified household so far.
Well, I just want the consistency of communication go out there, because then somebody says they have 5,000 in the same program. So I just want to make sure that we're not just saying it's 1,000, that it's up to a certain amount would be a little bit clearer communication, so that nobody thinks that we're, special people are getting some different things.
Sorry to interrupt, but you'll see that in your applications. We have 2 separate applications for those different grant levels.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Powers, you sent that info out to us a few weeks ago for the 2 different programs. So if you can't find it in your email, ask him for it again, because it was pretty clear what there was some qualifications.
We'd be happy to.
Well, the application you
Martinez?
said you just you just sent it this evening. Yeah.
Thank you. I also agree with staff on this. The roof replacement waiver, I had to replace my roof because of a hail storm a few months after I bought my house. I was really sad about it, but I was really happy to know that my homeowner's insurance covered it, thank goodness. If not, I would be in a pickle for sure. So I am supportive of staff's recommendation of not waiving that fee.
Councilmember Sierra, do you want to?
Yeah, same here. I agree with staff on that as well.
All right, I think we have enough of residents on no on the roof replacement waiver, but yes on the extending of the date of the first one, and then yes on the egress window fee waiver.
I'm okay with the roof. I didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did. You're okay with the roof?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I thought we had 1, 2, 3, 4, but everybody want to weigh in. I'll weigh in too. I'm in favor of I agree with Mayor Pro Tem on this. I think that the insurance piece is.
I would like to hear the information on why you are in favor of that, because I was kind of on the line on it.
Thanks, Mayor Barentine. It's keeping me awake. I want to. The last month or so haven't been perfect in this city, and I sort of defer to a little bit of what Member Cuesta brought forth in terms of wanting to be as supportive as we can and to overlook any possible thought of, any benefit of the doubt situation, and just provide support as much as we can to some of these citizens. I mean, if we're paying for something that insurance is paying for, that of course doesn't make any sense, but depending on the circumstance, I just want to be as supportive as we can. I really do.
I have a question for Director Powers. So I am totally in agreement with that, but from what I understood from this is that there would be no way to actually make sure that what we weren't doing is just discounting an insurance company for what a permit is. That's what I read in this. Am I wrong in that? Because if there's a way to do this without having that happen, then I want this money to go in the hands of the resident, the owner of the real owner of the home.
Right, I think Karen can amplify on this, but once an insurance company is involved, they're really the ones that were steering the ship in terms of the outcome of the contractor that's used and that type of thing. So I think it might be very problematic to try to intervene and direct that specific money back to the homeowner. But
I think it's a situation where we could waive the fee. The contractor could either keep that money, and they've charged, basically back to the insurance company, the owner, or the insurance company could keep that fee as part of their policy. There's no way to determine that whether that money would actually be returned or taken off of the customer's bottom line.
So the insurance company would not be required to discount the deductible by the amount of. Is there a way
it would be
to
by
do
a
that?
policy, and we have no idea what any particular person's policy is or how an insurance company views it.
That's what I understood this saying, and that's why I would say no. But if there's a way around it, Councilmember Barentine, and then you next. Mayor Pro Tem after that.
I think we're dealing with such a small area of what was impacted. What I'm concerned about is that somebody who's having to do an egress window, and I think this is partly to your point, Councilmember Wink, is that if they have to do an egress window, if they have all this flood damage and they have to do the roof, that, it's the piling on of all of this stuff. And so that's why I was asking, if their fence was taken down by flood, then I wouldn't want to charge them for the fence permit. If the roof, and we're dealing with somewhat of a concentrated area here. So if Councilmember Cuesta meant citywide during this storm that we wouldn't do that, I was kind of wanting to make sure that we didn't pile on to the people who already had significant other damage and would probably end up being past their deductible or whatever. And you made the comment that that would probably be covered in the application that they would do. You'd know that information.
well, again, I won't speak for Karen, but I think when we get into the water damage, it's self-evident of when it happened. I think roofs can be a little bit more problematic to try to define when that damage was actually incurred. And since we've had water damage from areas throughout the city, we don't know from a resident standpoint exactly which structures were and were not impacted. And so I think the issue, one of the things that we put in the memo for consideration is when we start to talk about roofs, we have a much harder time determining explicitly when that damage was incurred.
We're still in a time of year where there's still a possibility of having another hailstorm. Lakewood just had one last week. So you could have another hailstorm hit Inglewood that would not be part of that July 24th storm. So how to determine
And that speaks to the point that I'm bringing up, and that I think Councilmember Wink, and if this is the direction she's going, I actually agree with her, that if the hailstorm hits tomorrow and that further damages a roof that was already in a building that was flooded, maybe that's something that we should consider, because it's the piling on of this. It's the fence that broke down that let the water in that flooded it. And I'm trying to make sure that we bring these homes back up to a safe level and that they can afford to do this. So actually, if we kind of could put it to those situations where we're having this piling on of concerns and issues for structures in our community, I would like to make sure that they're safe and that they could do the work on them. So I would.
Mayor Barentine, I think everybody's in agreement with you. That's what we're trying to figure out. How would we get that money into their hands so it doesn't just get to be an insurance thing? So
that's why I'm agreeing with Councilmember Wink. Then I think that she convinced me that I don't want to pile on to people.
Okay, so you're saying yes to this now, to go ahead and, okay, so we're back to, Senator Powers, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I'll let the discussion continue.
Mayor Pro Tem, you want to change your view on this?
I just wanted to ask if there's a way to find out what their deductible is. So that we're not, it's only $1,000. A lot of times people have $1,000 deductible. even on their roof. So when they apply for the, but we're talking about waiving use taxes.
No, these are the permit
the
fees.
permit
The
fees
permit
for the
We're not
roofs.
talking about the grant program. That's
Okay.
separate.
Not on the next one yet.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're still talking about the roofs and insurance.
okay. A page back from this.
Do you have more you wanted to?
No, not right now.
So I think
That's it.
I think we have 4 of us for consensus to say no to it, but I am willing to say, yes, let's figure this out if we can get more money in the hands. And maybe it's just simply the ones that have been identified in the flood area that we know have had some particularly difficult challenges with all the other pieces. Is there a way we can add that amount onto their grant?
Yeah.
And that would be a different way to get around having it come out of the. I really don't want to be paying insurance companies for what they're supposed to be doing, especially after all the money we pay for insurance.
I'm not sure that we've done a grant for anybody who's had roof damage. It's mostly been for the water. So a couple of alternatives, just thinking off the top of my head, in terms of the roof issue. One is if people don't, for some reason, have coverage, we could extend it to those folks. So if they are in a situation where they're uninsured or they've been declined by their insurance agency for whatever reason, that's a possibility that we could do. The other one, to follow up on Councilmember Barentine's point, that is, and I'm not sure how we do this, we'd have to do some thinking about it, is if we could link water damage to people who also have roof damage in the piling on comment, we could somehow try to define that. I'm not sure how legally we do that, but that's something out there that I think might apply to not very many homes. I should also point out we're not seeing a lot of roof permits so far. So I think one of the things that just leads me to the conclusion was, yes, there are very specific properties that had much more damage, but this was more of a water event, it seems like, than it was a hail event. And so that kind of colored some of our thinking in terms of our recommendation to you. But those are 2 things that at least we could ponder. One is very obvious. If people are not insured and they can give us that assurance through some type of decline from their insurance company or whatever it may be, we certainly would waive that. We could waive that fee. And then, I mean, it's a little bit more of a gray area, but we could possibly try to link people who've had both water and roof damage for a combination of those fee waivers. I just tossed those 2 out for consideration.
Attorney McKinney Brown, are we putting ourselves in a strange place with this, or is it better to go straight with extra grant money?
I think right at the moment that step 1 is we bring the ordinance back for your approval, and if you've approved that, then it authorizes you to act by regular motion, which means that you still have, no matter what you do, it's going to take through October 1st to get an ordinance passed that allows you to take any action. So there's nothing you can do in the next 2 weeks, and I think that's 2 weeks that community development can use to brainstorm outside the box and bring something back to you to work with after you've adopted the ordinance.
Does that make sense? Member Cuesta?
And we may have touched on this before. These are retroactive, correct? If these pass and somebody's already picked
We will do refunds.
Member Barentine, is your stick up still because you want to speak, or? Well, okay, so summarizing, do you know what you would have them to brainstorm possible ways? I think the underlying feel for most of us, I'm not sure if Member Sear, if you want to add any more in, would be to figure out a way to get the money into the hands of the homeowner and not the hands of the insurance company, right? And more for the amount of the number of things going on. It sounds like you had a great process that you're thinking about. So it's enough for you to go on?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, great. On to the next one.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Thanks. We have refunds of sales and use taxes.
Oh, yes, we forgot.
Yeah, don't leave yet. I'm thinking, who's doing this one? We haven't weighed in on this one yet.
Did we just the home property?
Pardon?
Pardon me.
We're still on the first, yeah. The very last one.
We jumped the gun. I
Is an
apologize.
add refunding of sales and use taxes at the very end of that document. So anybody want to weigh in on this? Go ahead, member Cuesta.
An overview of the process. Is this something that the cities can easily do? Is it as simple as waiving these fees as well, or refunding these fees as well?
Initially, when council asked or agreed to allow staff to bring forth the ordinance that provided for a permit fee waiver for this issue, we kept the use tax out, primarily because it's not just the city of Inglewood that people pay use tax towards, it's also Arapahoe County. City of Inglewood obviously has no clear authority to waive any use tax that is owed towards Arapahoe County. However, you could, in theory, waive that piece that goes towards the City of Inglewood, the 3.5% use tax. So in order to keep it cleaner, it was like, just don't touch the use tax piece, just deal with the fee piece that's easily controllable. Were the city now, or council now, to decide to go back and amend the ordinance to waive that, because obviously the use tax is in our Inglewood Municipal Code as well. It could be done for the property owners that have come in to apply for a permit for reconstruction to be done. Only though for that piece that is owed to the City of Inglewood, not to Arapahoe County. So keep that in mind as well. Plus, it gets administratively a little bit difficult and burdensome for the finance staff to be able to control that and look at all that. So that's why we kept that piece out. It was easier just to bifurcate the permit from the taxation.
Thank you.
Is that helpful? Anyone else? I'll weigh in. I think staff's recommendation is probably correct, that this isn't possible. It's too complicated to figure this out, make it work. I'd like to rather find ways to channel money into people's hands for things directly, where we know it's going. Councilmember Martinez?
I also agree with staff's recommendation on this.
What? Oh, doesn't work, huh? You said maybe pass one down to her for a minute?
Oh, I can speak louder. I agree with staff's recommendation to not go forward with the refund of this.
Anyone else? And you're allowed to change your mind after a few minutes of listening to others. So, Councilmember Cuesta.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the waive.
You're going to go with what?
I'm going to go with waiving
Waiving it?
it. Yes, the 3.5%. I certainly realize that that's administratively cumbersome, and it takes more work and it is more challenging. The fewest fees we can pass along to folks here, I think, better. Thank you.
Great. Mayor Part-Time, I think you were going to speak on this earlier when you.
Oh, yes, this is.
You want to say
right.
something?
This is the one that I
Oh,
was.
Yeah.
This is the one I do agree with staff that we do not refund sales and taxes for material purchases associated with storm recovery. That's sales and use tax, though. That.
Anyone else? Member Sierra?
I agree with staff recommendation as well on this. I think it's just too difficult, too much staff time. Just think it's worth the time.
Member Wink, do you want to weigh in?
Well, how cumbersome is cumbersome when you say it can be a little cumbersome? You said cumbersome. Oh, did he say cumbersome?
Yes.
Whoever. What does that mean?
Would that be like you'd have to figure out how to get it from Home Depot because someone went there and bought all this stuff, and then that would be tax exempt, and you'd have to go to all these different kind of stores and places.
You'd have to gain the documentation from all the vendors for X period of time and backtrack and record everything and then go through some painful process and then get the 3%.
And zip code.
I'm not the expert here, but we do have the expert here in both Ms. Nolan and now our new auditor and revenue manager coming up to talk about that.
You always present things very clearly. And
Heather, correct me if I'm wrong.
The process would have to be that the contractors would have to provide us all of their invoices. They have, typically if they're pulling a permit, they'll prepay building use tax upfront. At that point, that would be not so cumbersome to go ahead and refund. The problem becomes when they do not provide their permit to the various vendors that they're getting their supplies from, they'll accidentally pay sales tax or local sales tax to those jurisdictions. Then it would be up to the contractor to go back to those jurisdictions to seek a refund. We would not give them the refund on those particular sales.
If they're going to different cities
Yep.
purchasing things, that also makes it complicated, I would imagine. That's what I was thinking, more cumbersome than
And the
anything
whole
else.
idea is if they give them the permit, we have reciprocity with the local jurisdictions to, as long as they have that piece of paper and provide it to the vendor will not charge the local sales tax rate because that will be considered non-taxable sales because of that permit fee, that they've already prepaid that local use tax.
Did that answer your question? No? Okay. Member Barentine?
I think what we could do, however, is go ahead and make sure that if the homeowner has that information on any use tax that they've paid that was within the city, we would be able to refund that.
If the homeowner, it all depends on who the general contractor is, who's ever pulling the permit. That's who we would be refunding.
Because
So
currently, right now, we don't even exempt nonprofits from use tax, so we don't.
Only if they're not their general contractor. That's correct. If they were their own general contractor, we would exempt them from use tax.
Okay, so.
So
we do have a vehicle in place then if somebody's doing their own repairs to go ahead and take that use tax off of there.
Yeah.
So we would be able to handle that fairly easily because we
For
do
the
that
individual, yeah. But if it's a general contractor, it runs again into the whole insurance and situation. You don't know if the general contractor is going to go ahead and then pull out that use tax that they might be charging the customer for the job. They might already have the tax rate already built into their cost of doing business with that home.
Well, they can't do that. I mean, they have to show the tax on their information because they have to pay it. So there has to be the documentation for that. But there would be something in place for anybody doing work on their own, and they might be able to go through the process that you already have set up through that.
Well, they'd be working with finance at that point in terms of any.
But they could go ahead and apply for that through that grant piece or whatever. If they're already doing work and they're qualified, then it's probably going to be part of all of this process that we're doing in some way or another. It's going to be identified already. It's not just everybody's use tax we're talking about.
No, it would be the individuals who are applying.
Who are affected with all of this. So maybe there's an opportunity for it to be just documented within that process if it's possible.
More likely it's going to be a general contractor who's doing the work. I don't think the individuals are.
We have some
doing the
handy
roofing.
people in our community.
Well, I understand. I understand.
No, I would say that
consider
a lot of our homeowner grant recipients, well, a lot, we've done 7 of them, they've done their own work because we've seen a lot of things for like carpeting and flooring, and some people have done their own work.
So if they came to you and said, I'm part of this process, I paid use tax, I bought this in Inglewood, I would like that refunded, or part of this grant piece, then that would be something that would be fairly simple to identify and document.
For that part, we would have receipts, we give that to finance, and they would do the paperwork
Okay.
from there.
So we might already have a vehicle to do that at least.
So I have a question then for someone who does their own work, which I do believe that a lot of people are doing their own work because they're able to, they're good at it. They're also getting insurance money to pay for it, right? Not all of them, but many of them.
So fee waivers are irrelevant to whoever's doing what work.
Okay.
Our
It's
grants,
agnostic to the whole thing.
our grants are only going for uninsured expenses.
Yes. Okay.
And most of the things that have come in for the grants don't require permits.
Correct.
So we're not collecting anything for those because it's carpet, et cetera, that doesn't require permits, so.
Right.
When you talk maybe about the refunding of use tax, that's for carpeting and things, which I'm not collecting anything, through the permit process for that.
Councilmember Wink?
Thank you. So we've been discussing refunded costs of permits, et cetera, et cetera. Let's say we advertise more, a little time goes on, and we get exponentially, but quite a few more than requests than we've gotten thus far. Are we armed and prepared to ensure that the process of communicating and getting the necessary paperwork back and to and from homeowners is very expedient, so they're not waiting and slogging through what seems an eternity to them?
We're keeping very accurate records for the people who've taken out applications for our grants and people who've requested more information, whether or not they're in the process of gathering their receipts for their expenses, and then obviously the people that we've paid. We're keeping all of that very closely recorded.
You even led me down a road I thought you were going to go. Maybe this is what you're thinking. I mean, this is not for sales and use tax.
No.
But that you were asking, right?
Correct.
You were asking. So, but what if we... It seems like it's the most vulnerable, those who don't have enough insurance, and it's just really piling up on them for all the different things. Is there a way to identify those and saying, and it would not be very many, where there is sales and use in the Englewood system that they're paying? Can we relieve them of that? Or would it be worth it? Would it be better instead to raise the amount of money that we're giving for grants and just not be bothered with all the craziness?
Well, when you think about, again, I don't want to generalize because all these folks are in a very individualized situation. And when they've gone to a place like Home Depot or something like that and have purchased their own materials, those taxes are fairly low in comparison to the $1,000 grant that they're receiving. So we kind of baked it into the cake relative to, that tax situation would essentially be covered by the $1,000 grant versus a separate step of refunding taxes that might be as little as $5 or $10 on some of these material purchases. And for finance to do that, when you look at the cost of the labor to do that, that's your call. We'll take that direction, but that was one of the considerations that we had, which was the $1,000 grant was really intended to kind of cover that type of expense as well, and to make it a little less bureaucratic on our side and a little bit more facilitative on the recipient side.
Thank you. For the sake of time, let's just run through just a round robin. Do you go with the staff recommendation on this or not? Mayor Pro Tem, would you
I go with the staff recommendation.
Member Wink?
I don't know.
Okay. That's okay. You can pass. Member Cuesta?
Thank you, Ms. Nolan, for the additional insight. That was helpful. And I am going to stick with the position of waiving the use tax. And I appreciate, if I've understood correctly, the onus would be then on the contractor, the homeowner, to keep all their receipts. And then that's going to make things easier in order to gain those refunds. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm going to stick
Well, we would
with
only be, for the sales tax anyway, relieving sales tax that was spent in the city of Englewood, not in some other place?
It's up to you.
Okay.
for Englewood sales tax. I would
Littleton,
agree that it's not
Denver,
appropriate
if they
for us
go
to
there.
waive Arapahoe County, but for Englewood, yes.
Member Martinez?
I would stick with going with the staff recommendation.
Member
Staff
Starr?
recommendation.
Member Barentine?
I think with your inclusion of this charges in that $1,000 to $5,000 relief that they could get through that application process, if you're including those charges in there, that they can get reimbursed for that, and I would want them to be reimbursed, to be qualified to be reimbursed regardless of who they paid, if they're getting that grant, if that's part of the cost of what they're doing to their home to improve it and make it safe in the city of Englewood, then I think we've kind of got it covered. So in that case, then, if with that caveat, then I would go with the staff recommendation, understanding that it's covered in the $1,000 to $5,000.
Correct, as long as they have $2,500 of uninsured damages and they're providing us with the receipts, That's how they get those grants.
And that application is online?
Yes, and you got it tonight from Eric.
Well, no, I meant to the general public.
Yes.
Okay. So then, if that's included in there, then I believe that we've kind of got it covered. So that's, thank you very much.
And I agree as well with the staff recommendations. So we have enough consensus to move forward with your recommendation there. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Sorry for the part two.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Thank you for working all this through, because these are all details that can get really kind of wonky.
And one clarification, you are going to let us know about a appeal process if somebody is denied, that they know what the process is,
We'll do
even
that
if
and
it's
put
for
it in
their
your
car.
newsletter. We'll put a memo in your newsletter.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is number 2, 3075 South Tejon property discussion, directional informational. City Manager Eric Keck and City Council, we will discuss this property, and you have a PDF on it. Manager Keck.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This particular item came forward at the request of the people who are renting the Tejon Fire Station from the City of Englewood. So if you go back to June of 2016, that's when the initial lease was performed with American Striping, was the name of the company. I think it's a DBA that they're operating under, but they've now entered their third year of this particular lease. About early August, they approached the Community Development Department, at least a representative from Keller Williams Commercial approached the Community Development Department seeking to see what it would take to acquire the station. And they obviously put forth a letter of intent, which is included in your packet this evening. So really this comes down to a policy discussion. Staff is not making any recommendation here. It's just a policy discussion of the City Council. Do you desire to see that Harvey Enterprises, doing business as American Striping, continues to lease this station from the city, or you would declare it surplus? Now, just to digress a little bit, anytime any property is declared no longer used for municipal purposes, typically there's an auction process that goes by. This particular lease agreement that was entered in 2016 had a right of refusal, first right of refusal clause placed within the lease, which essentially said if at some point in time in the future, during the time of their lease, the council were to declare this property surplus, it stipulated what would have to happen. What would have to happen is that a party wishing to purchase that would need to get an MAI appraisal to determine what the value of that property is and then acquire it. So the letter of intent that we received was a little bit odd in that it doesn't conform or comport with the lease agreement, which basically, again, articulates that if this were to become available, they're required to get an MAI appraisal, as you can see from the actual lease itself. But this is a, this is a 20-year lease, that they're in, again, the third year. So their lease rate in this year would be $42,000. Heretofore, they've been paying $30,000 a year to be in that particular facility. We appreciate the fact that they are doing extremely well in our community. I think, as we heard before, they've gone from 5 employees to 22 and are bursting at the seams. They are looking at adjacent properties on Tejon and the Dartmouth area to expand, and we would certainly love to keep them in Englewood. But at this point, again, in order for them to do anything, either to continue to lease or to understand from the policy perspective of the council what you would like to do, you would need to make that opinion known one way or the other. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on this.
Councilmember Martinez?
What is our process for determining if a property is surplus or not?
Yeah, certainly. I think it would have to have some study. We'd have to come forth with a recommendation and enunciate to you why we would feel like a certain piece of property wouldn't be necessary for municipal use any longer. This hasn't happened during my tenure, but for this particular property. When the City Council of 2015, early 2015, made the decision to contract with the Denver City and County of Denver for fire and EMS services, this particular property, came forward because it wasn't needed any longer. If you look at our agreement, which goes I think we have another 16 years now in the agreement, it's crazy, to 2035, 2036 time frame, it was determined that we wouldn't need to utilize the Tejon Fire Station, as Denver has several fire stations that surround this community and serve Englewood, including Station 36, which is located in Sheridan, which also is operated and maintained by the Denver Fire Department. Station 23, Station 22, that are also in this sphere of Inglewood that responds to Inglewood anytime there is a cataclysmic event that requires more than the resources that Inglewood has or that the Sheridan station can provide to us. So that's why this lease came forward initially. The council at that time decided that it was not in their mindset to want to sell this asset. They wanted to keep the property. And so in an effort to try to leverage the property that we have in the best way possible, that's when an RFP went out for the leasing of that property, and that's why we're here this evening talking about this. But typically, again, to answer your question, if in fact a parcel of property or some sort of municipal asset wasn't required any longer, we would come forth to the council and ask the council to declare that surplus. Real property has not transpired, again, in the 4 years that I've been here. Other property has. We've declared other vehicles and equipment that is no longer needed for municipal purposes that you have sent to auction, equipment auctions or just auctions in general.
Member Wink.
Thank you. Is our utilizing Denver Fire decision made for the rest of our days in Englewood?
Certainly, council can open at any time. When we first went into this particular agreement, it was studied extremely diligently. And when we first entered into this agreement, the fire budget for the city of Englewood was about roughly a little bit shy of, well, it was $9.1 million, but if you subtract out the fire marshal function, which we kept, we decreased that cost by over $3.5 million in our first year. So the agreement itself with Denver Fire, like I said, is a 20-year agreement, and it would take, if I recall correctly, 17 years into the agreement to get back to the point where we were when we had Englewood Fire from a budgetary perspective. So it was economically fortuitous for this community, but more so the number of resources and the types of equipment that we get from Denver Fire well exceeds the capacity of anything Englewood could ever have been able to do on its own or with its reliance upon what used to be now, or still is until the end of this year, Littleton Fire and Rescue, as well as South Metro Fire and Rescue. A good example of this would be, July 24th, but I hate to bring that up again with the flood. We had technical rescue teams that were here. We had the dive team that was sent here. Those are assets that Englewood never had. And so if this council or a future council were to decide to end its agreement with Denver Fire, you certainly can. It has the same Tabor language any other agreement that has multiple years. But understand that it would take a significant capital investment as well as a significant investment in personnel for Englewood to take over the fire service. And again, if I would leave you with anything, if you look at what is going on with respect to fire and EMS across the country, even here in this region, you see consolidating going on. So, for example, Littleton is now moving to South Metro Fire and Rescue. You see a number of small departments now who are asking themselves, we can't sustain ourselves because we don't have enough personnel or we can't afford the capital cost. There is significant consolidating going on. And so Englewood should, if you're looking at that, do it in a measured approach and look very carefully because there are going to be costs.
Thank you. That was very helpful information. And so is really the straightforward detail that we were missing in the application or the submission of this letter of intent, the fact that we didn't get this required MAI that's laid out in their lease, right?
That's one aspect of it, but again, Councilor Wink, I think what this council needs to decide and to make a determination so that American Striping hears this very clearly, as well as their representative, Charlie Cummins with Keller Williams Commercial, is whether or not you want to declare it surplus.
And then lease it, have the auction, et cetera, and then they would submit the MAI, and then we're...
Yep, they'd have the right. They have the right of first refusal, which means they would have to go get that appraisal and then come and say, "Here's our appraisal."
Okay.
I think Manager Keck is wise in what he's telling us. Really, this decision is not about this particular organization. Yeah. It's really about, do we want to sell this property?
Yeah.
And if so, they have the right of first refusal. Yeah. And so this prompted it. He's bringing it forward.
This isn't our recommendation at all.
Yeah.
I guess I have a question in terms of the pricing per square foot and just understanding the sale price. We have that area zoned as industrial.
Correct.
There's other comps within the packet that are a mix of industrial, residential. Mm-hmm. Does that depress the sale price or depress the square footage if we still have it zoned as industrial?
It does. Industrial land, however, in the Denver metro area has increased significantly in price. It's very difficult to come up with industrial land here for a number of reasons. However, I would say don't focus on those comps because those comparables came from the CW, or the, not Coldwell Banker, but the Keller Williams commercial broker to kind of articulate where they want to be. And again, those are really irrelevant. But you're right to look at what is the value of our industrial land in Inglewood, and it fluctuates and it varies. Those comparable were picked by the representative of American Striping, and we respect that they put that together. But again, the lease requires them to go get that appraisal.
Yeah, I just saw it interesting, the wide fluctuation between properties that aren't that far apart. So just trying to understand if the zoning played a part.
And again, with industrial properties, there are various degrees of that too. So a lot of what we see in Inglewood, and a lot of these comparables were tilt-up construction, which is prefabricated concrete tilt buildings. They're going to be different than a steel constructed with a different type of skin on the exterior of the building. So there's gradations of quality of industrial too, and that's why I think you saw what you did with that, as well as a lot of industrial buildings are going to be rated more expensive per square foot if they have high clearances. So for example, you can use forklifts inside and use it for warehousing or manufacturing, power systems, whether or not you can sustain welding units or a lot of heavy duty equipment and motors and pumps and things like that. That's going to drive up the cost of per square foot, as well as just the finishes, floor finishes, as well as the tenant finishes inside for office space. So there's a lot of factors that drive that. And so comparing a former fire station to an industrial building is really tough. So that's why there's a number of factors that an appraiser would have to utilize in ascertaining what the cost and value of that land and the improvements would be.
Member Barentine.
So in their contract right now, in their lease, they're currently responsible for the utilities and maintaining the interior of the building currently.
That's correct.
And I think the concern lies in what Mayor Olson brought to us, and that's, and City Manager Keck, that the information we have is all provided by them. And until this council makes a decision of whether we want to sell it or not, we don't really have a basis for what we would sell it for, who else might come to the table. They have the first right of refusal, but not the first right of refusal at the price that they offer. So we would have to make a decision of what we were doing first, and that would be, first, are we going to let this property go? Given the buildup of density in the area, I don't know whether we shouldn't have a conversation of what we think service in that area would be for Inglewood, whether it's ever necessary or not for that to be a government facility in the future ever again. Denver Fire made that decision that they would be working out of some other station and that they didn't need it. Maybe we could have made that decision even if we'd have kept our own force. Maybe we would have made that decision. But with the influx of population, we have to make a determination on that area, and would it ever be necessary again? I would like to at least have that information on whether we would ever have the need for this in the foreseeable future, for it to be maintained as government property for any purpose, for us to serve that area up there. And then if we do decide that we wish to put it out, I think it's important for us to go ahead and make sure that we get the information separate from somebody who wishes to buy it on what's available. And third, to your point, I think that is important, that in the other opportunities or uses for this property, if we were to decide that it was reasonable in that area to do a zoning change. Industrial property is coming very scarce in this area because of the residential. But if we thought that the real future for that area is going to be a different zoning, then we would want to make that determination in what we were doing to look at selling this. And that could significantly change the price of it. So but we would have to have all of the players at the table once we've made those decisions on whether we're going to sell this Obviously, the first thing being whether we would even sell the property, because we don't know who would come to the table at that point, what kind of suggestions they may make, or whether they want to do a PUD or rezone, or whether we would. So I think we're a little informationally deprived on what we would be doing. I appreciate them coming forward with it, but there's so many. The first thing I really think we need to decide is whether for any safety or government purpose we may ever, as Councilmember Wink brought up, we are not locked in to Denver Fire. That is a yearly contract that we do. So we would need to make determination first on so many levels to kind of step up to that and get to that point.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in before I come back to you, Member Cuesta. I really think the issue is whether or not we want to sell this property, and I don't believe we're in a place to make that decision. And I don't think it would be wise without a really great overview of that area, what our plan is, what we're thinking about. Pardon?
That's not our charge for this evening, though.
No, so that's why I'm saying I would say no to that. I love this organization. They've been great. I hope they don't leave, but this is a bit of the tail wagging the dog for me tonight, so I would prefer to say no to this at this point. It doesn't mean that it's a no forever, but if council would like, we can put it on the agenda for a study session to look at that property and decide in the future, do we want to let it go to surplus or do we want to keep it where it is for now? That's my 2 cents. Member Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. For starters, thank you and congratulations to American Striping. They're a good business. They're a tenant. Sounds like they've tacked on more jobs, which is great. For the time being, I think their offer was just over $500K. The value of that lease, taken through years 1 through 20, is almost $900,000. We could just write out that lease, assuming they don't leave. We've made $900,000 off it. We sell the property. I think Inglewood citizens are expecting us to be much more savvy with their resources. We made a recent decision on property in Waiver that I won't even raise, that I know still is an issue for many folks. So this would be a non-starter at this point. However, again, I do thank American Striping. I do appreciate them as a tenant and them bringing jobs to Inglewood.
All right, does everybody wants to weigh in? Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree with Mayor Olson and Councilmember Cuesta. I do greatly appreciate American Striping and kudos to them for how they're growing their business, but I do believe that we need to be very wise in what we do with our property. And we can't create more property. We only have so much. And so at this point in time, I'm not interested in selling it.
Member Martinez.
I was going to say, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think we need a lot of further study if we're going to even consider selling this. So at this point, I'm not comfortable.
Looks like we're fully in agreement. One thing I would be concerned about for American Striping would be to make sure that they know we want to be their home. And I hope they wouldn't leave for this. I know they are thinking of buying that other property, but hopefully they can lease from us and buy the other property, and we have a long-term relationship.
Right. Yeah, certainly. And again, this is what's brought forward by them, and I appreciate what they're trying to do, and they're looking out for their own destiny and how to control it. But I think many reasons why not to make this property surplus have been articulated tonight, and I can certainly convey that to them. I believe they're probably watching tonight's meeting, and so, again, we thank them too. They've been fantastic tenants and just unbelievably amiable folks to work with, and have done a nice job in making enhancements to that property that they're using today.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's take about a 5-minute break, and we'll come back and do our last item on sales use tax code definitions.
Yeah, you bet.
So I get in the middle.
Do you want to swap?
Sure. I feel so. Oh, and there's a.
this, I'm going to hold to.
You're going to hold who?
I'm going to save this because we better not have a rate increase. I'm telling you, the contract that we signed for the expansion of the plant dictates that if we go below a certain reserve, we have to do a rate study due to an increase. So I'm going to save that one.
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Good to see you, man. How you been? Yeah?
Pretty good. Just got back from Vegas for a week.
Oh, did you really? Oh, wow.
Saw Queen while we were there.
Oh, you were?
So,
Really? So with the new frontman, what's his name?
Adam Lambert.
Adam Lambert. How was it?
Amazing.
I've heard so many good things about Adam Lambert.
It was crazy good.
Okay. That's
Out of this world.
That's the actually probably Prince is up there now. He passed. But I was going to say that Queen would have been the number one show I would have wanted to watch.
It's always been on my list, and we decided we were going to take a trip to Vegas anyway, sometime this fall. So my wife was looking to see Queen's
Right.
It's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was
Real cool, man. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Queen, so.
Yeah. No, it was exceeded my expectations.
Right.
So.
Hey, buddy. What's going on, man? Good to see you, JJ. Yeah.
Wow. I'm really happy that you guys voted that thing down. Talked about that.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense.
Well, yeah, they kind of lowballed it, so I'm kind of curious if they're going to come back.
And in this, to be
It
honest
makes
with
sense for them to do that.
Well, no,
Oh,
I get
sure.
it. But
And I would too. But you know, in this climate that we have right now, economic climate, out for us, consider letting anything go that's providing us this
All right.
positive
Where
revenue
we're kind
stream.
of, well, just all the thing.
Yes, I was waiting.
Yeah,
I was
it was like it was waiting
to get to the
it's
real
in the
part of
background of
this.
everybody. But yeah, but we're landlocked and we only have so much land, so it's not like we're just going to give it away. Yeah, man.
Cool.
Good seeing you. I'm not sure about being able to make it tomorrow night. I'll try.
That's fine. Yeah, it's we just wanted to.
It sounds like you guys are going to just like generate ideas. You guys
About
see what we can do.
JJ's talked about doing a book run. Talked about a number of things possibly to raise some money. So I want to kind of put it out there for the citizens.
Yeah.
Some ideas.
Okay. Yeah, let me know what you come up with. I'll be happy to help in any way.
Sure. Like we did 5 projects for this.
Yeah, I'll see if I can come up with some ideas.
We
If I
had
can.
lots of families with little kids.
Okay.
And the little kids chipped in and they were unbelievable. The kids were so well behaved and so helpful.
Cool. Good to see you.
Yeah, it was very fun. Like,
Where's the house located that you worked at?
ours is on Clarkson.
Gotcha. Well, that's neat. That's good.
Yeah.
It was, yes, a terrific event. I'm looking
I
forward
learned how to
next
glaze windows. I'd never glazed windows before.
I didn't do anything new. I've moved a little rock around. Some dirt
That's
around.
hardcore.
I feel like you were
I
a pro
came
at
by
it.
and you
man.
guys
no,
had
Definitely
left.
I was
directed
trying
it.
to keep it within.
I came by to see it. I just took a peek and because I was supposed to be somewhere else and I was really behind. But I wanted to see if you all were still there and I think you'd left about an hour before we had. But it looked good from the front.
Yeah, I was really happy with it. And again, everybody was in high spirits, really good group.
It's pretty impressive how quickly we got it all done. Just like seeing that many hands.
That
And
is such hard work. How many did you have on your team?
10 or 12.
10 or 12, I was going to say, somewhere around there.
It was in and out. We had a
Yeah.
few people shuffle there, a few people leave.
But we had a nice little like assembly line going. People putting rock on the wheelbarrow, then bringing the rock over.
A little strategy.
Yeah.
I can believe that. I think we had a few folks who were just good with that too, which helps.
Oh, yeah. They knew what they were doing.
You have to have a good attitude
Yeah.
too.
I think we had some engineers out there, which I'm certainly not. So
Well,
it's helpful to have.
yeah. Well, Vicky incentivized me with beer, so.
Yes.
And so it's like it kept me going.
Very kind of So, and the weather was good.
Oh, the weather was great.
It was a little warm, but it was good. It was still good.
It would have been worse if it had been today.
I was gonna say anything over 80 degrees, and I complain about the heat.
Did you make it out to the
Yeah, I did, and I was worn out by then. A couple hours. Yeah, she was there. She was there.
I did probably a couple hours.
Yeah, good turnout.
All right, if everyone could take their seats, I think I'm not sure Member Wink's in the room yet, is she?
She's out talking
Is
to
she?
Mr. Margiota.
Oh, okay. Amy, can you go give her the call?
There we go.
Howdy. Hi. Don't forget to introduce Heather.
All right.
I know she likes to
Great. I think we're all back in the room. Thank you. Hope
Mayor
you
likes
break.
to keep an eye on me.
We're on to item number 4, which is sales use tax code definitions, licensing, and occupational tax discussion. This is directional and informational tonight. So our Finance and Administrative Services Director, Kathleen Rinkel, is here to present, along with one of her new staff, I believe. She's going to introduce and go ahead and take it away.
Sure. I've got Heather here. She's our new supervisor for the, if I can get it right, revenue, audit, and licensing. And then we've got Jenny, who's our senior financial analyst.
What are their last names?
Oh, sorry. Heather Driscoll, Jenny Nolan.
Great. And Heather, welcome. If you make sure that when you speak into these because it's live streaming and nobody can hear us otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Put it between us. How's that?
Okay.
That might help. Okay. So good evening, Council. Tonight we're here to ask for your direction on some proposals. We brought this forward in March saying, we're coming. We'd like to make some proposals on sales and use tax, occupational tax. So here we are. So tonight we'll take a look at the standard definitions update, which Jenny will take us through, asking to require a license of all businesses rather than just our retail businesses, and Heather will take us through that, and the associated code changes that we'd have with those things, and then a proposal for a Tabor question on occupational sales tax.
As Kathy mentioned, our first topic tonight is seeking City Council's direction regarding the adoption of the standardized definitions. This code change would be effective the 1st of January of 2019. This project was a major collaboration between the sales tax administrators of the surrounding jurisdictions, not only in the Denver metro area, but around the state of Colorado. And it was facilitated by the Colorado Municipal League. The main objective is to have a standardized definitions across the jurisdictions within Colorado. And these definitions are to provide clarification and consistency across the jurisdictions. And adopting these definitions will not change the existing tax base. And that's the major intent of these standard definitions. Why is it important? First of all, we're trying to address some concerns businesses have had who have businesses in multiple jurisdictions, and standardizing the definitions will assist them in understanding the tax code a little bit easier and understanding the definitions of some of the taxable transactions that occur in the jurisdictions. You may or may not know, but Colorado's self-collecting sales tax system is cumbersome for jurisdiction or for businesses that have businesses in multiple jurisdictions. And the consistent definitions we're hoping it will make this process less complex for businesses. The Colorado legislative history that brought this particular project into existence was back in 2014. The Colorado General Assembly was putting forward a proposal for a constitutional amendment to standardize definitions, and this amendment was eventually abandoned. But out of this, Senate Joint Resolution 14038 asked CML to develop a package of standard definitions, and this was a project that was similarly conducted back in 1992, and we, as the city, did adopt those standard definitions at that time. So this is basically a reboot or a refresh of those standard definitions. The project overview consisted of a 23-member steering committee and consisted of sales tax administrators from the surrounding jurisdictions. This project was similar to the standard definitions efforts, as I mentioned, that was undertaken back in the early 1990s. And legal as well as the business community reviewed the standard definitions, and the definitions were finalized back in February of 2016. And as of July 27th, we have 39 self-collecting home rule municipalities adopting the standard definitions, and we're one of the 32 holdouts that remain to adopt the standard definitions. And if City Council so directs, within the latter part of this month and throughout the month of October, we'll work with the City Attorney's Office to review and provide an opinion that the standard definitions will not affect our current tax base, because if that were to occur, we would be subject to a Tabor election. And assuming that no Tabor election is required, we'll draft an ordinance to adopt the standard definitions upon City Council's direction. We'll also make a tax matrix that is also included in tonight's package available to the business community and provide them a 1-month comment period so they could provide us with any questions or concerns they have regarding the standard definitions. And between November and the end of the year, we'll provide City Council with the comments received from the business community during that comment period and draft standard definitions ordinance, again with the assistance of the City Attorney's Office. And then this slide right here just provides you some of the appendix and reference information that we have included in the packet. There's a letter from the coalition of organizations that have supported the definitions. We have the Englewood tax matrix that we have reviewed internally. We've looked at our current code, looked at the standard definitions, and determined, whether or not that they would affect our tax base. This matrix follows the 15-page standard definitions that are also included in the packet for your review. And I will pass on the presentation to Heather Driscoll, and she'll now discuss the other code recommendations that we are proposing for City Council's discussion.
Would you entertain a question?
Oh, sure.
At this point, Mayor Pro Tem Hezra?
Has the city attorney looked at this at all yet to see if any of the standard definitions would change?
Not yet, no.
Okay, but you're fairly certain that they will not change the meaning of our current codes?
Without your direction, we didn't want to go forward and suck up the city attorney's time.
Okay.
Yeah, save on manpower if we didn't have that consensus to move forward.
Okay, so if we do have consensus to move forward and the city attorney determines that something would change, would it be able to come back to council?
Yes.
And we could reconsider whether we want to do that or not?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And we'd be bound by Tabor in most situations to do that anyway. So
correct.
That's if it increased taxes. I don't think a decrease it has to go in front of that.
Okay.
As Jenny mentioned, I'll be discussing.
I need to pull it over just a bit closer.
And I end up with two.
Kathy, do you want to make sure that you'd like?
Thanks. Since you'll be next.
So as Jenny mentioned, I'll be discussing the code changes as well as licensing. What we would like to request from you tonight, Council, is direction regarding requiring all businesses operating within the city of Englewood to be licensed with us as well. We would like this to be effective January 1st of 2019. Currently, our code specifies that only retailers must be licensed with us. However, any business operating within our jurisdiction does have a use tax liability possibility. Why? Well, first off, use tax is tax that is imposed when sales tax has not been collected. This typically occurs when something has been purchased not in the jurisdiction of Englewood or online or catalog sales. Local businesses don't always realize that they might be subject to use tax because it's something that's not very well known despite our efforts with the website and those type of items to get the word out there. When we go and conduct an audit, businesses are sometimes surprised when we identify a use tax liability, and we have to assess that. This can lead to negative perception of our city, which is what none of us want here. Some additional benefits to requiring all the businesses to be licensed would be access to monthly training. Our MuniRev system will send them monthly updates when they're required to file with us. In addition, we're a ready resource for sales and use tax questions. If somebody's licensed, they're more likely to contact us if they have a question versus if they're unlicensed. Also, if we do have code or policy changes, it's very easy to reach out to the taxpayers and let them be aware of that. Back in July, we looked at our land track system and we had 1,400 licensed businesses and approximately 2,200 unlicensed businesses from the best guess that we could from the land track system. If you do tell us to go forward and we update the ordinance, what we would do to reach out to those 2,200 businesses that aren't licensed with us is every form of communication possible, from emails, postcards, to the website, as well as social media, including Facebook, Nextdoor, and paper methods of the Citizen or the Herald. Another idea is the Inglewood Chamber of Commerce, and we'd actually discussed possibly a billboard, just something to get the word out there, although not sure if you guys would like a billboard, but it's an idea. We would also allow an amnesty period of 3 to 6 months to allow businesses to become compliant in this time frame so that nobody is blindsided. We don't want that, nor do you all. If a business does not get licensed according to the ordinance, after that period, we would strictly enforce the $500 fine as allowed by our code. Some other code changes that we would like is to move from a perpetual license to a biannual. This will allow us to stay more in tune with the businesses that are operating within our municipality. In addition, we'd like to clean up the code language so that it's clearer for our taxpayers to understand, especially if we're asking another 2,200 businesses to become licensed with us. We want to make it as easy as possible for them. We'd also like to improve the language for the building use tax refund requests. With having additional businesses be licensed, we're anticipating a revenue increase with that. We estimated that approximately 20% of those 2,200 businesses would have a use tax liability with us. And as you can see on the slide above, we could generate roughly anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million in the first year and $1 million plus each subsequent year. Now, with more than doubling the amount of businesses that we currently have, there's obviously going to be a requirement for more manpower, including 2 licensing techs and another sales tax auditor so that we can maintain a 3% audit coverage. Our plan, if we're instructed to move forward, would be to work with the city attorney to draft an ordinance to require all businesses to be licensed with us, and then bring that to you all in November for your consideration. And then I'll pass it. Oh, sorry.
Member Sierra has a question, I think at this point.
Is it okay to ask a question now?
Yeah, sure.
So I guess a little bit of confusion on my side. So the estimated use tax collections, this is use tax that we should be collecting, but we aren't collecting.
Correct. Given how our code is written, a lot of businesses don't realize that they do owe us that use tax. And without the businesses being required to be licensed, we don't know that they exist, so we might be missing them in audits. They're not voluntarily remitting it to us. And by having all the businesses be licensed, our goal is to increase voluntary compliance.
Okay, thank you. And then the 3 positions that were added here, this was part of the discussion we had a couple of weeks back on the operational side of the budget, correct?
We do not have this in the budget at this point.
Okay.
We would request additional appropriations if this were to go forward.
Okay.
But it would be well covered out of the revenue that we would expect to get.
Perfect. Thank you.
Member Martinez also has a question.
I have 2 questions. Would there be a licensing fee for the businesses that would come on board?
As it is right now, we have a $25 licensing fee, which helps with our costs of the tech. It doesn't fully cover everything. We have a fee schedule, but it's nothing mandated in our code, so that is something that could be considered if the council would like.
Okay, so it's a small fee currently.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question is, I get this recommendation and why it's a benefit to the city. We would make a lot more money, and it wouldn't kind of take the businesses by surprise about the use tax liability, and I totally get that. But if we go forward with this, how are we going to convey to the business owners that it's in their interest as well? Like, what's in it for them? I get what's in it for us.
Mm-hmm.
City.
Well, it is per our code that they do have a use tax liability if they have not satisfied the sales tax. And so if they are licensed and they're accruing and remitting to us accordingly, then if they were to get audited, they would not have a deficiency if they did accrue and remit accordingly, and they wouldn't have any penalties and interest. And so that does work out for them. It essentially is holding everybody to the same standards. No one business is having an advantage over another because they're not meeting their tax responsibility to the community.
Mm-hmm. And another side note there is the businesses that are currently there, their employees benefit, and as do the business owners themselves with the great infrastructure that we have in place in terms of our roads, bridges, and storm drainage. So that would be another benefit, I would say, to the businesses, and they're contributing, to the maintenance of those and replacements.
Member Barentine has a question as well.
How many businesses are you estimating that are not currently licensed?
Approximately 2,200 based off of the land tract
and
system.
those are currently not required to be licensed?
We're not 100% sure. They might be retail, but we only have 1 tech and 1 auditor as of right now, so we're trying to reach out to as many as possible. But
I thought we had at least 2 auditors out there.
We're trying to hire another auditor as we speak.
Did we lose one?
I was the other auditor.
Oh, okay. So we're anticipating there's about 2,200, but we don't really, we're not sure because they're not licensed.
Yes, that was commercial addresses from the land tract system.
Mm-hmm. And then you said for non-compliance with the licensing that it would be around a $500 charge?
Yes, that's laid out in our ordinance.
And it's around $25 to go ahead and be licensed?
Yes.
With $300,000, apparently $3,500 to go ahead and do this program is what you're thinking?
About $250,000 is what we're anticipating, roughly.
That's a
I thought
cost.
you had it up
As a
on your
cost,
screen
yes.
there that it was-
239.
that the total cost was going to be somewhere around
239.
Oh, 239, okay. So my concern is that the legislature goes to standardize, the general legislature, the real politicians, go to standardize this, and they dump it. And they put it on the back of CML to go ahead and start getting this done. And I would kind of like to know why they abandoned the amendment in 2014. So I'd like just a little bit more history on why they abandoned it, because if it wasn't palatable to them at the time, especially with them looking at getting a state sales tax and then taking the pool of money and then redoing it out to us, I'm concerned about why they garnered CML to start doing what might be their dirty work on there, depending on why they dumped it.
And then I believe that was pertaining to the standard definition, so it wasn't pertaining to sales and use
I'm
tax.
still concerned that they put it on the back of CML to go ahead and do it, and that they did not do that. I want to know why they abandoned it.
Okay.
Yeah, she's talking about the first issue that you presented, not the current issue.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't know we could ask questions.
Oh, sorry, no, that's
they
okay.
were.
That's okay.
So go ahead. I think they were
Can I
confused.
finish?
Yeah, you sure can.
And then, because then it looked like they kind of went, hey, CML, go do what we don't think we can do. So I'm a little confused about that. Also with us being a home rule and each individual municipality, why I think there might have been pushback before is that I believe that this might take away some local control from us. I mean, you have different communities have a different kind of industry or a different kind of workforce in there that they may wish to have control, and I'd like to understand that a little better before we go into standardizing them, because I think that might take some flexibility and some authority away from us as well for the standardization. I think this might be a little bit more of a push to go ahead and get to a standardized state tax where they're just divvying money back out to the municipalities. I want to make sure that I understand what the previous problems were with it. Also, I don't think that it necessarily is a benefit or not a benefit to a business to make it an even playing field, because no accountants have to be licensed, have a business license right now. So, I mean, it isn't a benefit of one to the other because we don't require it of any of them right now.
Where it would benefit is some of those businesses that operate in multiple jurisdictions, they're aware that if everyone has to be licensed in those surrounding jurisdictions around us, businesses can come into Englewood, set up shop, and then they're not remitting the tax that is due that they would have to pay in another jurisdiction.
Which might be why they're coming here, and so that might actually be a benefit to us that they're doing business. So I would like to know.
I think she was. Could you let her finish? I think.
But they're not. But they're not remitting the use tax to us if they're coming here, knowing that we're not. We're not staffed up, or we don't have it in our code that they have to be licensed. It's just revenue that is escaping our city that they would have to be paying in jurisdictions
surrounding us. But they're an even keel with all the other businesses in Englewood because they're not remitting use tax, unless you can show me the number of businesses that are remitting use tax voluntarily without the license piece of it. And then in that case, I would like to have that information.
There are in one of our slides, we showed that we currently have almost 1,400 businesses, 1,398, who are licensed, and they are remitting sales and or use tax.
Right, but what I don't know is what kind of breakdown that they are.
Oh, we can provide you that breakdown. Sure.
I mean, some of your more service industry ones, I don't know if we want to break that up. What I have a problem with is some of the concerns where we've already had problems with the use tax being charged in audits, like for pizza parties for some big industrial place. They're having a pizza party, but they're already paying the tax that we're not kind of keeping within our own understanding of what we're charging, and we're losing some businesses. That's what my concern was, and I did request that information before to see if any businesses that we audited, especially on the industrial side, had left the city after they were audited, but I just haven't received that information yet. So it would be helpful to know how this is going to impact, especially businesses that are working out of a home, and especially if they're working for a company and then they're part-time working out of their home, how we're going to handle those kind of licenses. The pampered chef, the people who do, Tupperware and all that type of thing have brought up some concerns about dealing with the city as well. So I'd like to know how we would handle those as businesses, because they've already had problems and concerns just doing the sales tax piece of it. So I'd like just a little bit more information on some of those if we could.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I actually appreciate Councilmember Martinez's question about what's in it for the business owners. And they we don't have any liaison or any representation for the business owners in this city. And so it's like taxation without representation. We all sit here and decide, yeah, we're going to increase the use tax on you, and they have no representation because they don't live here, most of them. And the employee benefits, the roads and bridges and things like that, one thing that I think we need to remind ourselves is that every business owner on Broadway and in this city are paying 4 times the amount of tax that every resident is paying. And I was talking to a business owner that told me that some of these businesses are paying $10,000 a month in property taxes that are coming back to the city in infrastructure. I think my concern is that we need to be business friendly and not want to just get every penny that we can out of them. They're making a living. That's why they're in business. And I think we need to be careful about that. I had one other question. Just a second. Is there a way to get input from the business owners?
In terms of?
In terms of, would you support this? I mean, here's how business owners vote. They don't vote at the ballot box. They'll pick up and leave this city. And if it becomes too cumbersome tax burden for them, they will leave. And we've got so many vacant buildings already.
I mean, if they were to leave Englewood, they would still be subject to the sales and use tax obligation in other surrounding jurisdictions.
But isn't it a little frivolous to charge use tax on pizza?
Well, I guess we need to know a little bit more of the specifics of that particular case. But I mean, use tax is a complementary tax to sales tax, so everyone pays the sales tax. The use tax becomes a use tax when they haven't paid the sales tax on something that is taxable and bring it into the city of Englewood, or they pay something below the 3.5% local tax, and then they're paying the difference between, say, they purchase something in Littleton at 3%. We would only charge them the difference between the 3.5% and 3% that they've already paid. So it's something that they would normally pay sales tax on, whether they're in the city of Englewood or in a surrounding jurisdiction. So I don't think it's an additional tax that is being required of them. It's something that we require of our residents. When you and I go shopping, we all pay sales tax.
Could you give an example? I mean, as, say, an accountant or somebody who isn't
hold on.
normally...
Member Barentine, could we let Mayor Pro Tem finish, and then
Member
Cuesta has his up, and then Member Sierra does. Please hold your question, and we'll wait just a minute. Mayor Pro Tem, were you finished?
Yeah, so were you finished answering the...
I think so.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
I thought it would certainly help me.
Member Barentine, just hold off. There are other people that have
Thank
their
you,
sticks up. We'll come back to you.
I heard you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Great.
I'd like to...
Done, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
I'd like to add some clarification if I can. Our current ordinances require them to pay use tax. They just aren't
all
paying
business
it. All
or
businesses.
or retail businesses?
All businesses.
All.
And residents. I mean, it's within the code. All individuals.
It's actually, you've probably heard about it more on the news around tax time, that now there's a line on the Colorado State Return for individuals to remit use tax when we're filing our individual Colorado State returns. So use tax has been, the word's been out a lot more over the last, I'd say, 4 to 5 years. And it's not a new tax. It's just simply if somebody would have gone to a retailer right over here down the street and bought something and paid the 7.75% tax, it would be fully satisfied. But if they go out of the jurisdiction, they go to unincorporated Arapahoe County, that city tax just is not being satisfied. And we're just simply asking for that to be remitted accordingly. It's
from individuals or businesses?
This is pertaining specifically to businesses, but it would apply to individuals. We're not planning to go out and audit individuals at all or require them to get licensed.
At least not right now, right?
That's not anywhere on my plan.
I want to remind people, as we keep going here, is that we asked staff to bring this forward. We asked them to look for ways that we should be looking for revenue, and this was one that we talked about maybe several weeks ago. So it's not something that they just dreamed up out of the blue to figure out. We've asked them to come forward, and we're going to have more come forward, I'm sure. So let's be kind to those who've worked really hard on this. Member Quest, are you the next, or Member Sierra? I don't really know which.
Actually, it's just they answered my questions.
Oh, okay, great.
Thank you. So going back to slide 17, I believe it was, on your presentation, which had the licensed, unlicensed, and total businesses, the 1398. So each one of those is currently remitting a use tax?
They are licensed with us for sales and or use tax. We can get the division of sales versus use tax. That's not a problem. We can run a report from our Muni Rev system.
But it's likely not everyone is paying use tax.
Likely not, because we do have some businesses that are online retailers or businesses that are just making deliveries in that don't actually have a physical presence that would be accruing or incurring a use tax with us.
Sure. And then if we were to go forward to, I guess it'd be slide 920 on yours, which is the prediction that there's currently 452 businesses that are not paying use tax. So really it's those 1,300 that are covering use tax within the entire city right now, when there could be another 452 that would be, I guess, subject to that use tax as well, is the estimate.
That's our estimate, is 20% of the 2,200 that are unlicensed, we estimate would possibly have a use tax liability.
You know, I can certainly and I think Mayor Pro Tem gave you a great point that we want to be as business friendly as possible. I could see some business saying, oh, why am I paying use tax if there's 452 businesses out there not paying it? Now, having said that, the way we go about enforcing the licensing, or we send an email and then and then it looks like a postcard, and then after that we give them a $500 fine. I think that could be a very bad taste in some folks' mouth. I think that if I understood the process correctly.
Well, and we definitely, that's the same method that we had planned, that we did for our Muni Res when we went online. As I mentioned, we would also reach out via the Herald and the Citizen and online social media, Nextdoor, Facebook, possibly presenting at the Inglewood Chamber of Commerce. Any way possible to reach out to these businesses, because we don't want anybody to not be aware of this change if it does happen.
Yeah, I don't see this as a new tax upon those folks, but you make a great point, Mayor Pro Tem, that if it wasn't the tax you're paying yesterday and you're paying it today, it's a new tax. You know, whether it was there the whole time, it feels like a new expense.
Well, but businesses are surprised, when they are audited.
Sure,
so.
Sure. I certainly appreciate that. This is a touchy one, and I think if we do move forward, it's going to have to be administered very delicately and in the most friendly manner possible, and that's if it were to move forward. And I appreciate the work on this. This was very informative. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions before we go back to people. So on the fair, or what's it called, the land track system, how accurate is that in predicting, do you think, the numbers that you have? Is it a fairly stable kind of prediction, do you think?
I would say it's pretty accurate. Our community development GIS individual, he gets downloads from the county, I think either quarterly or monthly, but I could double check that information for you. So if there are any new addresses or new suites added to buildings, he'll have that information loaded into Land Track.
Because I think one of my concerns would be on slide 20 with the personnel costs. If we did that automatically and yet we were off on our mark with what it would be, what the revenue actually would be to cover, I'd want it to at least cover the costs of what it was. And then the second question is, when other cities have come around and done this, do you know of any more recently that have kind of pulled this in to have more consistency, and what the impact was on businesses? Did they leave town? Did they come over to Englewood because we aren't collecting? Or
I think the majority of jurisdictions around us, they license all of their businesses.
Right.
Absolutely.
I've heard that from other cities and always been surprised that we don't. And that's kind of my third question is, we've had this code, just like a lot of other codes, that we don't enforce. And I know Mayor Pro Tem's been concerned, as well as a lot of us, about other kinds of enforcement of codes. It seems really unfair to me that we have some folks that are not actually paying, and yet we have a code that says they must. It seems like we should either change the code so that only retailers do this or something like that. It just seems like the only fair process to go forward. I mean, nobody wants to be taxed, and I certainly don't want to be one who's going to be that person. But
Well, we definitely agree. I mean, it's, there's only so many hours in a day and only so many people on the staff, but we absolutely are trying to reach out to as many businesses as possible and keep them informed. We do offer a monthly tax seminar that is on our website. We've also started putting that on the Nextdoor platform as well as Facebook to try to reach out to as many individuals as possible and let them know about that. We included one of the topics on it was, what is use tax? And so we are trying to spread the word as much as possible just to get it out there, because it is something that if you read the code, it's out there. If you go to the website, it's out there. But sometimes people, it just, it doesn't register. And we want to help them understand what their liability is. Nobody wants to find out that they owe taxes and have penalties and interest on that. But how the code is written, that is currently how it is administered to the best of our abilities.
I'm not sure which was next, Member Martinez or Member Barentine.
Go ahead, Barentine.
As an example, if somebody bought their employees $100 worth of pizza every day, but they paid the tax and they get it somewhere else, and the sales tax for us would be higher, would they owe the difference of the tax?
So you're saying that
they buy $100 of pizza a day for their employees, and they pay somebody else's tax, and the tax is lower there. Do they owe the difference in the tax between what that municipality charged them and what we would charge?
Yes,
okay.
They would.
They find that not business friendly. Nobody would actually think that would be that they're skirting the law. So I don't know whether we have an education piece of it, or that if we haven't been enforcing things, I think we need to come to a determination on how we're putting that forward, because that is onerous to somebody, and that would be they rightfully would feel blindsided. On the
information, is this a real business that does that, or is it an anecdotal?
It was a business
example?
in Inglewood.
That's
why I asked for the information on any businesses that had been audited that left the city. Well, and I haven't received that piece yet, but that's a separate issue, and I'm glad for your interest in that. The information, where is that in the revenue manual, or can you give me the budget piece where we have the audit information, how our change in audit processes and our increase in personnel has affected the budget? Where's that number at?
There was one in the monthly report in July, but I didn't bring it with me.
No, I meant for our proposed budget. Do we have that in there of what we're anticipating on collecting on any of the audits?
We don't.
Okay, so I'm just trying to ask that information and how we're coming up with it. We're going to cover $239,000 or $236,000 by the audit, and what historical information we have that what's going to cover that. So if you could provide that would be helpful as well. That's all I had.
Council Member Barentine, on slide 20, we do indicate, based on the 2017 average business use tax reported, we're averaging on those who have remitted, we would collect $3,109. Now, if you multiply that by the 452,000, I believe that's where we're getting our $1,405,000.
But these are all.
That's based off of current information that we have.
No, I appreciate that, but that current information doesn't correlate over to what we're trying to do. One, you would have additional audits that would have to happen, and the additional licensing. That's what the $236,000 I thought was supposed to cover.
239, yeah.
Right. So that's the additional piece, not what you've got already. I mean, you're talking about the increased educational piece and more than likely increased audit piece to go ahead and bring those businesses that haven't historically had to even be licensed, let alone report that tax. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we had.
I guess I'm confused because the additional revenue that we're anticipating that we would receive in a full year would be approximately $1.4 million. But because we're going to incorporate a 3 to 6 month amnesty period, we're looking at half a year. So our first year, we're looking between $500,000 to $1 million of additional use tax that we're anticipating.
Right. And I would get a better feel for that by knowing how much additional money we had gotten through the audits that we've been doing since.
So
you're
just audit collections.
So you're looking
for
the last several years.
Okay.
So I think that would give me a clearer picture of not necessarily where we're compliant in it, but what you're trying to change is people who aren't compliant. And so obviously the audit would be more apples to apples to give me an idea of where we're at with that.
I understand.
And
thank you.
The reason that I asked for businesses that had been audited as we were moving this process that may have left this city is that I want to know if Councilmember Russell's point could be well taken, that if we're using a process that they feel is onerous, or even, I mean, whether they think it's fair or not, it's their reality and they get to leave. If they've left after being audited, that would make some impression on me. So I'd rather not charge, as an example, the pizza thing and go, you got to pay the difference on that. If I'm going to frustrate somebody into leaving, then we may want to look at some of our policies and the way we're handling audits. I don't know. I'm just using it as an example.
Sure.
So thank you.
No, I understand. Thanks for the clarification.
Member Martinez has her.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, and I promise I will be efficient.
Thank you.
So the current process for remitting use tax, is it only through the audit process, or are there other ways that businesses could remit use tax?
No. What we do is we have a standard sales tax form, and on there, there's a line for the use tax to be remitted if they are currently licensed with us. And we also have an initial use tax form for businesses that get licensed with us initially, so any startup costs that they can remit the use tax for that form.
So it could also happen through their sales tax process, not only through audit.
Correct.
Okay, great. And then second, I guess I would make a suggestion is if we continue to study this or move forward, maybe we get Alliance for Commerce in Inglewood and the Chamber to kind of help us work through some of these communication pieces or feedback issues.
That's a great idea.
They have a lot of touches with those folks, so it might help to get their perspective. And then regarding the implementation of the 3 to 6 months, I wonder, in the interest of or concerns with being business friendly, if it would make sense to extend that at all. I mean, that's a lot of businesses
We
to
absolutely
reach out
could.
during that time. So just wonder if we could extend that.
Sure. 3 to 6 months.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Those are your 3?
Yeah.
Great. Councilmember Wink.
Good question. Thank you. So, have you not yet discussed this use tax, sales and use tax piece with ACE?
No, we have not. We've not.
Oh, they've been working on it for what? Are you aware they have been working on it? Oh, yeah. They made some identification. Were you?
Are you sure it wasn't Budget Advisory Committee that you're thinking of?
No, it was definitely ACE.
ACE. Okay.
They were also aware of the number of businesses not subject to, and did some work behind it. Yeah, it'll definitely behoove you to collaborate with them.
It's great news. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So in the interest of time, we're at 8:45. We have 2 different pieces of information that you want us to give you direction on. Council, do you want us to go to the 3rd one? I think the next one's going to be even harder. But do you want to make some directional decisions or information to them for the first 2 and then see where we are on the 3rd? We have...
Bless you.
The first one is the definitions, right?
Yes.
It's whether or not we standardize definitions Anybody want to weigh in on that? We already heard from Councilmember Barentine that she wants a bit more information on why the Assembly chose not to go through with something. Member Martinez?
Do you want to? You asked for additional information?
Yeah, I'm just somebody new asking on this. I'll come back. Keep it up. I'll come back to you.
Well, you speak for me.
I would be supportive of moving towards the standardized definition projects. I think particularly because of the example that was given for businesses that may have operations in additional jurisdictions, it would help them streamline things for them. So I think I would be supportive of that one. Are we going to take one at
No, let's do one at a time. Let's take this one first. So,
Thank you.
Councilmember Barentine?
I'm not for the standardized definitions until we have information on exactly why 32 municipalities remain to adopt that. I think that this is a issue of home rule and some of our own industries, and I'm concerned about the push for the state piece of it, along with what the mayor said for me.
Great. Anyone else want to weigh in on this one?
I'm also in favor of moving forward with this. Obviously, we would still have to get in front of our Madam Attorney, but I'd like to at least start looking into standardization.
Yeah, I think I'm at least ready to get in front of the attorney, get your read on it, and then it comes back again.
Okay. We're a long way from this.
And I wonder, now, it's not lost to me. I wonder why those 32 held out. Maybe it's just a matter of they've dragged their feet, and maybe there's good reason as well. I certainly appreciate the local control, and if there's specific things that we need to hold on to. It's something I'd like to consider a little bit more, but it sounds like as you can begin reviewing, we would also get the information back on those 32 municipalities, and then we can regroup and go from there, would be my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
I concur. I'd be very happy to read the additional information and very happy to allow our attorney to move forward.
Mayor Pro Tem,
At this time, I really would like more information too on the home rule municipality. If it is going to change our local control. So.
I'm in favor of this because we're a long way from approving it. So it's getting it in front of the attorney. I actually think it's going to take a long time for this project to even get done, probably. I'll let you weigh in on that and whether this has got a timeline to it that you're clear about.
I just told Councilmember Wink in response about the Nature's Kiss that I'm hoping to get to that ordinance by the middle of October. So honestly, the earliest I could see this getting back to you guys would be November.
And in the meantime, some of the other requests for information could be there. I would also love to know a little bit about, one of the questions is why haven't we done this? So we can ask, what are the other 32, why haven't we done this? Has it just been, it's escaped us in time, or, because we're one of the 32. So is it just that the city didn't, you want to answer it? No.
I went to the CML meeting back in July, and it was regarding the sales tax project, and there were some municipalities that their code is just such a mess that it's becoming quite the endeavor to go ahead and revise their ordinance, and there were a large portion that were working on adoption in the same process we are, analyzing it with their council and those type of items. So there's some in the process, there's some that are going along with us, and so it's just, everybody has to each their own.
Perhaps you could share any slides or anything from that CML workshop, if there are any.
They actually didn't. It was more of a call and it was mostly to discuss the ideal of the estate one system for the software that they could remit under the state and then pay out individual returns. But they did have an update regarding the standard definitions, but no slides pertaining to it.
I don't think it'd be too tough to make 32 phone calls, though. Figure out where
Okay,
they
if
are
you're willing
why.
to do that, that would be great. We'd find out a little bit more. And I also, so I think we have enough to move it forward. I actually think this would be better for business overall to have some streamline and not have such a confusing thing, especially those who are between several cities. It just makes it clearer, which is why the state wanted to do it. But I think it was actually local control that made them back off from it. That's my understanding of it when CML was proposing no against it, was this does not allow for local control. Let us voluntarily do this and leave it up. That's your understanding too. But anyway, we can get more information for that. I'm sure someone's more knowledgeable than I am. Okay, so on to the next one, which was the second one, the standardized, the business, So the proposed tax code change to require all businesses to license. Where are we on this one? What kind of direction can we give them tonight? Councilmember Sierra.
Same here. I'm in favor of moving forward with the code change. I see it the other way around in terms of there's 1,400 businesses that are following code, and yet we don't have 2,200 that are following code. So I think, also we've been having the code enforcement discussion over recent weeks. So, I think we have a lot of ways in how to enforce this. We can enforce with a heavy hand, or we can enforce or kind of, build up the education for residents as well as the business owners so that it doesn't feel like we're being strong-handed in a sense. So I still want to move forward with it, and then we can just discuss how we implement it.
Councilmember Martinez?
Thank you. I am also leaning towards support of this moving forward. However, I think we should include ACE in the chamber in this discussion. I think as we move forward, I think they're going to have really valuable input on that. And I think we should consider extending the implementation period over a longer duration of time.
Councilmember Barentine?
I'd just take exception with one description of what you said, Councilmember Sierra, and that's that we have 2,200 businesses that are not complying. They are not required currently to license, so they are complying. If there is the belief that they have use tax issues that they are needing to deal with, is anecdotal in those businesses. Currently, right now, it would increase it because we would have we would know how many businesses and they would be licensed. But they're not skirting any law right now. They're not required to be licensed. And then there's the assumption that they have, and it is an assumption that they have some use tax thing. They could be paying more to get their paper for their printer and for the accounting. They could be that they put in their printer. They could be paying a higher tax for their pizza that they give their employees, or they could be paying less than ours, whatever that is. But that's an assessment. That's why I asked for that additional information. I don't want anybody to get the impression that we have 2,200 businesses in this community that are lawbreakers. That's not necessarily. I'm not trying to put that out there, but we could potentially have some additional. I mean, obviously, we're looking to have additional revenue from this. So I think that there are some more serious concerns, especially the more entrepreneurial and localized we get, that we may cause ourselves some problems. And I would like to see ACE and the Chamber come into this. This is more heavily going to affect the smaller businesses. The other ones are rather identifiable, and so I would like to get some more information and find out how that would affect that. And then it's the implementation and how we hold them accountable and what that's going to look like then and what that's really going to cost us. So
Can I come back to you?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Member Question.
To start off with, there's 2,200 that are not licensed currently, which they're not required to be. I think to say it's an assumption that there's no use liability throughout 2,200 businesses is a stretch.
I didn't say that.
You did just say it's an assumption.
No, I didn't say. I said that how much they would be getting from it would be the assumption.
Okay. Having said that, I would much prefer to get the voice of our business representatives, the Chamber, ACE, and I do think that the enforcement right now is heavy-handed. I think this is a proposal that, and I hate kicking these back, I think this is one that just needs a little bit more work, input from business community, and then possibly loosening up that enforcement piece if we decide to go forward with it. So I would not support it at this time, but happy to continue the discussion after we've met with our business representatives.
So you wanted to move forward with in terms of businesses being contacted and brought to the table, but not tabled as a total?
Not tabled entirely. I think that the discussion should be continued with ACE and the chamber at the table.
Or a hybrid in between, we need more information. Councilmember Wink.
I agree with what Member Cuesta just said. And Member Martinez's comment about maybe a little bit more time, you're talking in addition to the 3 to 6 window? Yeah. I wondered if that's a little slim for some businesses. I know we gave some reasons why it's adequate, but I could think of a couple of circumstances under which some business might need a little more time. So, or we might need the time. So I also agree with perhaps revisiting the time frame.
Member Martinez?
I have I just have a question. So is it possible, I'm tired. Two issues on this particular item, the licensing unlicensed business and collecting of use tax. Are those two things like married, or could we decouple them where we tackle the unlicensed business piece separately from the collection of use tax?
Well, we're currently collecting use tax from the licensed individuals, or have a mechanism in place for them to report use tax. Now, those who are unlicensed,
so we can't really separate the two.
No, either.
It's kind of hard.
Yeah, because
I just want to make sure I understood that it was kind of a package deal.
It is.
Helpful. Member Sierra.
Yeah, and just to Councilmember Barentine's point, she's correct. The 2,200 was for the unlicensed, and actually the percentage that you showed that weren't the use tax was the 20% estimate of that. So just a question on that. So are we, and I guess to follow up on that point, so are we only talking about the licensed versus unlicensed portion at this point, or what aspect of this are we looking for you to move forward on?
Well, I believe we're looking for guidance in terms of, do we make our code clearer in terms of licensing all businesses, and so that they're responsible for sales and or use tax
versus just retailers.
Because our ordinances do have the requirement of paying use tax as a business. So if you're licensed, you're going to be more aware of it, that it's required, and hopefully pay it when you're supposed to.
Okay.
Instead of being surprised.
Being surprised during an
Right,
audit.
exactly. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
The part that I am concerned about is I do think we need to connect with ACE and the chamber to work on this, and I am more concerned right now about perhaps the heavy-handed enforcement on some people and not on others, and so I think that, not only connecting with the ACE and chamber, but looking at a way to deal with these issues that are business friendly. Of course, people don't like to pay taxes. But we all have to pay taxes. But I think there needs to be a way where we can be respectful and not add more trouble. So I think I would like to hold off on moving forward with it, other than getting feedback from ACE and the chamber. And actually, I think ACE has a joint council meeting coming up with us pretty soon, right? That's okay?
Later, yeah. Are you
okay, I'm finished.
I did want to say that I really appreciate your putting this together, because we've been asking for things to come forward, to think about different ways that we can be more efficient with our revenue generation in places that maybe it should already be coming from. I want it to be fair, and I want it to be just. And I think providing the 3 to 6 month could be later. The fact that strictly enforce the fine in 2020, that's pretty generous. So I was glad to see that. I would like to see us just take the next step and get it out to ACE and the chamber, and perhaps some of our larger. Swedish is one of those that had a use tax issue because of this, right? Or just actually they're not licensed as a business, but so that is an example. That's an awfully big one, but. And then the final thing would be, I'd like to get a little bit more info on these anecdotal examples of who is not paying, or who should be paying or is paying or got asked to pay, and it seems onerous. And I think you just put out a council request on this, didn't you? So did it come last week or just today?
It came last week.
Last week. So there is one. Do you want to?
Director Rinkel could talk about that.
I didn't bring the numbers with me, but it is in your packet of responses, I think this week, was it? Yes. Or last week? Where we did address Councilmember Barentine's request for having information on which businesses had closed after being on audits. And that being said, we do about 40 audits a year. It's not huge.
Mm-hmm. And we had no businesses closed due to an audit. We did have one that was planning on moving out of Inglewood prior to even the start of the audit. So that one did close. Otherwise, no businesses moved out.
Have moved out because of that.
And I would like to just put a note in regards to use tax liability. I was an auditor for almost 12 years, conducting anywhere from 20 to 30 audits a year. And in that time frame, I came across one refund of overpaid taxes and no incidences of when no tax was due. Typically, it was at least a couple $1,000s up to $1 million that was due to the jurisdiction I was employed for. And so that is money that is due to the jurisdiction. I do know that we've had some relatively large collections for Inglewood from the current auditor, and so it is money that's due to Inglewood that can go to help our citizens. And so it's just some food for thought.
Thank you. It sounds like we're pretty much in agreement to move it to the stage of figuring out what businesses and ACE folks think about this. Does that sound accurate? At first, it seemed like there were a bunch of us that wanted to move it forward, but is everybody okay with that as the next step? Yeah, okay, great. Does that give you enough information? And then you'll end up having to bring it back to us, obviously.
Yes.
So this isn't a done deal. So it is 9:05. Do you want to have a conversation about head tax? That's not the right. Occupational privilege.
It's also called head tax.
I
just
know.
Depending on who you speak to.
I saw yes, somebody wants to do it.
I prefer to postpone it because I think this is going to require a lot of time and thought from council's perspective. It's going to be more than 1 hour. So I prefer to postpone it.
I agree. I'm exhausted.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay, so what?
Councilmember Martinez.
So here's, could we do this? Could we, for 5 minutes, could you give these wonderful people any more feedback on more information you would need to be more equipped to make a decision when we do come together, make some assessment?
On the occupational tax?
Yes, on the last one. Did you write any notes that say, hey, what is this, what is that, that you could give to them tonight?
I have the week before. The week before.
And if not, if you don't find any, perhaps we can agree that between now and the end of the week, you will send some via city manager. Would that work? Works. Does anybody want to just say a few?
That'd be preferable for me, if possible.
Do that and save the 5 minutes.
Member Martinez has a...
I had a couple thoughts. First, the same thing with the additional, or the topic we were just talking about is I wonder if we should get ACE, at least ACE and the chamber involved in maybe brainstorming through this because it will impact them a lot and they might have some perspective that we don't have. I also would like to...
On both topics or just?
Just the last one.
The last one, okay.
Occupational tax, I think it would be good to get their perspective as we're working through this.
Oh, okay.
Also, somewhere in this information, it listed the top 10 employers in the city of Inglewood. I don't know if it's preemptive to do this, but to reach out to them and get their thoughts on it before we discuss, or if we should wait until after. But my thought is, as we're talking through that, they might really have some feedback that would impact our discussion. Because what I'm thinking is with our largest employers, it's probably going to impact them the most. So that wasn't very clear, but...
No, it is. No, it's good.
That's better.
I think that's it right now.
Okay. Rupert, did you have?
Actually, I forgot to put it down.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Member Sierra.
I think the only question I had, and I don't remember seeing it in the notes here, was if there was a minimum size of company that would be...
No, we don't have that, but we do have a threshold on the employee of their gross monthly earnings.
So it's okay.
It's based on employees' gross earnings.
Not by the size of the company.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Member Martinez?
I have one more. And I don't know if this is your group that would kind of recommend that. Probably not. But I did talk to one business owner about this, and they said one of their major questions would be, okay, if we put this much more money into the city, what would that money be used for? So I think that's something we should consider as we talk through.
Member Sierra.
That was actually one of the things I was going to bring up was whether we were going to earmark it for something specific. So obviously it's something that we would discuss as a group, but.
All right. So for those of us that like to get it out tonight, we don't have to think about it again. We've got a few, but everybody else, all of us.
Got a good flow going. Let's keep it going. Let's go.
Keep thinking about what else you might want to get from their great minds so we can have all the info we need to make some directional decisions with them in the future. All right? Does that make sense? Thank you very much. Sorry we didn't get to all of it, but next is council member's choice. Who would like to start? Mayor Pro Tem.
Actually, I would like to start, and I think that there was a communication breakdown between the mayor and myself after the last council meeting, because I had shared that I did talk with Councilmember Barentine, but I think we left this meeting with two different directions, and so I think that council did not get a unified message. And so I think probably what would work best is if you would just email all of us, because when I left that meeting, I didn't see any credible threat. And then when I read the newspaper article, it's obvious that I don't know if the newspaper was correct in saying that, but I would like to know if there was a credible threat that I did not hear about, and so I apologize for the communication breakdown also, because it was partly my fault, and I think it's just because we interpreted the situation differently.
Thank you. Councilmember Wink?
No report, thank you.
Councilmember Cuesta?
You bet, and I may kick myself for bringing this subject up later. You entertained me last week regarding short-term rentals, and what is the city's official position on those? There was a council response this past week, and I appreciate it, and it appeared that they said those were outside the boundaries of what's allowed per current code. I was pointing in the direction of a staff report that was placed into the Herald where they are explicitly described as an illegal rental. We had that woman who approached us last week, Ms. Tammy Williamson, where it seems like it's impacting her quality of life, as she accounted the story to us. Does Inglewood have an official position on short-term rentals at this time?
Our code has conflicting provisions. So what you received was code provisions associated with Chapter 16. But we have code provisions in other sections that may allow it. And it's one more example of the fact that the code was written over so many years without going back and making sure that all the provisions were going to work together, that we have some conflicts. And I actually have put together a council request, and I'm seeking some input from a few more members of the city staff, so that you're not just hearing what Chapter 16 says, but you're hearing what Chapters 1 through 15 might say on that as well.
And I guess I appreciate that. I will repeat the question. Does the city have an official position on short-term rentals at this time?
Depends on which section of the code you're looking at.
Yeah. So there is not a yes or no answer to the question. Does the city have an official position?
As an attorney, I think if something is not specifically prohibited, that it is allowed under the code.
So they are allowed.
I'm saying I don't see that they're specifically prohibited, and there are sections under the tax provisions that seem to imply that they are anticipated as lodging. What we call short-term rentals today, 20 years ago, was lodging opportunities. So I am now giving you legal advice in an open session that will be used against you if you try to take any action one way or the other. And I'm just really uncomfortable doing that because it blocks the city into a corner. So my official answer right now is I can't tell based on our code specifically what our stance is, and I think that this is an action, this is an area that council really has to take some action on to clarify what our current code position is.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this is one of those areas that it bothers a lot of people, where private industry has gotten way out in front of government regulation. I think Airbnb and the other similar businesses are a perfect example of that. Having said that, and I know we've got our open house on the 20th, it sounds like it's a pain in the neck, per the description of Ms. Williamson, on a daily basis. We'll have our open house, and I'm sure the wheels will continue to turn. But it's tough for her on a daily basis. And it sounds, I don't feel as though I got an official position from you, which is understood. I appreciate the conflict you're describing there, which sounds to me, though, that it's not enforceable, or at a minimum, we're not taking any enforcement action against any short-term rentals right now. Is that safe to say?
As far as I know, we are not taking any action against short-term rentals at this time.
Nor would we if one were reported.
However, the issues that Ms. Williamson described go well beyond short-term rentals.
Sure.
So those are being examined and looked into. Specifically, anytime the quiet enjoyment of one's real estate is interrupted by the things that she's dealing with, those are some things that we'll look at and are trying to determine whether or not we can enforce. But as far as you just asked, whether we're enforcing the closure or not permitting any short-term rentals, we're not engaging in that until we get clarity of what the attorney has just talked about.
Thank you. I won't badger you anymore.
No, you're good.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
It's not badgering at all.
Thank you, Mayor.
Are you finished? Could I ask a question with that then? Is it possible that we create a moratorium in the meantime while we're working it out? I mean, this city's been known for moratoriums, some that were not good for a long time, but...
What would it be a moratorium of?
Of having short-term rentals, or I don't know. I mean, if
So
that's what you're wanting, then you have to enforce.
Again, there's not a licensing of that process. So you can say no more short-term rentals, but how do you know? How do you know? First in time, first in right. It's not like water rights, right? It's different.
So, well, a couple people asked me, why can't we just declare it so there's something clear until we figure it out? And this one, it's not, you don't believe it's possible.
But what you should do in the interim is, if there are short-term rentals, encourage people to actually pay their lodger's tax, because that clearly is not happening.
Okay. We can, yeah.
Bring a question like the mayor did. I would agree that if we do have the lodging tax and a system in place already to address short-term rentals as lodging, and they're not in compliance with that, then it would be something that we could enforce. So I would like to have a little bit more information on how we could move forward, not with a moratorium, but enforcing the lodging requirements. That if they're acting as a hotel and the short-term rental comes under that lodging, then we need to enforce it.
And that would be a position that we would be saying they're allowed, and we're going to collect this tax on it. I think that's what is needed one way or the other. As I'm sure everybody knows, we got to do something.
And the laws that go along with that, which would be lodging requirements.
A little bit more information on it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez.
No report.
Member Sierra.
I just want to give a thanks to the City of Inglewood, Allison Carney, or Communications Manager Allison Carney, and her team for the Inglewood Block Party. It was, for the couple hours I was there, I had a great time, and it seemed like a great turnout, so great job.
Hear, hear.
Councilmember Valentine.
Yeah, they did do a nice job. I went in the afternoon and then again in the evening, and everybody was having a pretty nice time. Everybody was very grateful that we did it earlier, because they were cold last year. And so I think the timing went well. I think all the businesses did a really good job. Went past the 9 o'clock because everybody was having a pretty good time. So it was well done. I think we're looking, now that we've got our budget books, we've got more work to do. So looking forward to the next meeting.
Are you finished?
I am.
Okay, great. I wanted to echo well, first of all, I wanted to respond to Mayor Pro Tem. I do think there is a miscommunication on some things regarding security and whether or not it was of a level. I did want to disclose to you that after we did meet with someone who was reporting, we did have a meeting between Mayor Pro Tem and I and the manager about what the response would be. And so I assumed from that meeting that it was clear what we were doing. So we'll have to figure out a way to do a little bit more information around those kinds of things.
Could I ask the mayor a question about that? Yeah. When you brought it up that you thought that the Mayor Pro Tem had communicated with me, she did communicate with me exactly what she believed was going on at the time, and that's why I think it's very important that the communication come from one person to all of council. I mean, I don't think I've ever gotten actually any personal communication from you the entire time you've been mayor, and I would really like to see all of us communicated with equally. She apparently left that meeting with a way different understanding of what ended up happening, and then apparently the communication from some subsequent thing that got to the rest of council was way different than what I got. So I would appreciate it if it would go to all of council from one source and not with the assumption or pushing that responsibility off for certain people onto somebody else.
Sure. I totally get that, and under this circumstance, there was an encouragement not to send emails since there is an ongoing investigation. So when the whole thing happened with the city manager's resignation, that's why I sent things out to everyone all at once. So we will figure out a way to do this. I think the flood illuminated how communication difficulties come up when things happen that were unexpected. And it's one of the things that I'm concerned about as we move forward with our communication department, that we have a clear PIO-oriented kind of person overseeing some things to help, because I don't think any one of us should have to be standing in and trying to do that. That's a professional job. I really do appreciate the Saturday was phenomenal in the city. The Be a Tool, there were over 225 volunteers there. Huge turnout with like 16, 17 teams going throughout the city, working from 8 in the morning, some of us until 3, with projects that were really cool. And part of our seniors, people who've had difficulties getting some things done in their homes. It was just a really wonderful, positive, hardworking day. These 3 here did moving of rock, which was probably the hardest muscle day. So I appreciate everyone that came out. And I'll probably mention this next week in there too. So I went from that to a ribbon cutting at the Medici property, which has been open for a while, but they did a special ribbon cutting with a number of people, and they named one of the building the Penn Building, and that was a huge surprise to former Mayor Randy Penn, which people didn't know about. I didn't know until recently. That was a fun event. And then the block party, I also went at the beginning and was just amazed at how many people were there at 3:30, 4 o'clock. It was just, people bustling all over, and lots of families coming in with strollers, and just a great family time. And then later in the evening in the closing concert, I thought was really fun. And the weather was outstanding, so I don't know how you ask for anything better. And then on Sunday morning, I think we all got an invitation for the first responders service that Sanctuary Church put on, and I did go to that. It was a very kind, sweet event. I think it was their first time doing it, so not many showed up that were first responders, but they're going to try and work on it next year so that more can be there, but a very strong intent to care for the people who really are on the front lines for us with their lives all the time. So it was a great event as well.
Before we finish that, I just have one more question. City Manager Keck was able to show me that response, and I appreciate it was kind of hidden in all of the other. It appears that we have approximately 10% of the businesses that we audit close or leave the city. And so I would like a breakdown of those businesses. I do think that's a rather high percentage, and I'd like to know whether they're industrial, more entrepreneur, what sections those are coming from, and the money that they were paying but then leaving. So if I could get that information. Thanks for pointing that out to me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
That's all I have.
You'll get that to all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the 2 businesses were Kmart and Sports Authority, so that kind of skews things.
So that was the 10%.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't the 10%, but it's part of the 10%, but it's not the 10%. So I would like to know what that is, because it's
we'll
not
get that.
helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo what you said, Mayor, about the Be a Tool event. What an incredible opportunity, and just want to thank those from Council, Mayor, and Member Cuesta, Member Sierra, who came out and worked. It's one of those days where you wish you could have those days every day. You had so many people from diverse backgrounds coming together, working for the common good of the community doing something for neighbors. There's no arguing, there's no fighting, nobody's yelling. And it was actually fun shoveling gravel. I think we did 10,000 pounds of material.
Rock seemed bigger than gravel.
It
did not look like gravel.
All right. Okay, it was landscape rock, 3-inch minus rock, but it was
gravel to you, sir.
It was good. No, just
Got
great.
to work out more.
Great opportunity.
Indeed.
And I hope that this community will continue to support that program going forward. I was telling Member Cuesta during the recess that hopefully the goal would be to create a well-oiled machine that at any time during the year, if somebody needs help, you can just dispatch. Tony Arnaldi, the mistress of volunteers, can get people out engaged and taking care of helping other people in the community. I think that's the goal of what we're trying to create here. And so please continue that program going forward. That's it.
There was also a nice little thing that they did for Manager Keck that morning with a huge card that people signed, and we did some fun things to embarrass them on purpose.
Yeah,
but,
thank you.
Thank you. City Attorney?
No report.
All right, we are adjourned. We will see you on Monday. Early again, 5:30.